Welcome back to Heaving Bosoms, the podcast where two best friends recap romance novels while cackling and crying, critiquing and connecting.
Gonna love what we love, do it out loud. Stack our shelves with the clinches out. Shout it from the rooftop, can you hear the sound? Yeah. Live your best life, love it out loud. Love it out loud.
Hey HBs! After some reflection, I decided that I missed the intros where I get to talk directly to you. So, I'm bringing them back. Okay, wowza. Today, I'd planned on telling you about a hugely exciting announcement. But when I realized that this was the episode that would accompany it, I changed my mind. Stay tuned for a bonus episode that tells you all about it. For now, I want to make sure you know what you're getting into. Lots of you have gotten your wish because we have a certified hate episode coming at you. Ooh, we are big mad. We talk at length about the trigger warnings in the first 20 minutes or so, but I want to give you a quick rundown just in case you want to bail before our snappy music is even done. This episode contains discussions of sexual assault, including in young childhood, on-page violent rape, statutory rape, kink shaming, slut shaming, fat shaming, and more. We may not love this book out loud, but we do love you at the top of our lungs, and you should too. So please take care of yourselves. All right, here's our recap of It Had to Be You by Susan Elizabeth Phillips. You've been warned. Oh my gosh. Hello, Sabrina.
Hi, Mel.
All right. Hey, listener, here's the deal. We don't have banter for today. We can't do banter.
No,
we are not
angry.
We're not in a place or a time or a universe in which banter is even possible. Here's our banter.
If you love It Had to Be You or Susan Elizabeth, because I don't know Susan Elizabeth Phillips in general, right? But if you love her and you especially specifically love this book or probably anything that she wrote in the early mid-90s, turn this episode off.
You got to go. We love you. We support you. We think that you are great. You know, everybody's got their dark lover, as Sabrina said to me on the phone yesterday.
Yep. Yep.
That's fine. But this is not going to be a very kind podcast.
There's no whimsy available here. So,
No.
to give you some context, because I'm sure some of you probably don't remember or haven't heard Dark Lover or whatever. Dark Lover is a book that I read right around the time it came out. And so rereading it 15 to 20 years later for podcast, I was able to look at it through nostalgia glasses. You know?
Yeah.
I whimsied
nostalgia
it.
glasses.
I looked at it and I was like, yes, this is all problematic, but this was definitely of the time. And like, I enjoyed it at the time and blah, 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 blah. I was able, and like, I can acknowledge that it has problems and understand why Melody came in and hated it. Right.
I came in hot. I had never read it before. I read it through a 2024 lens and it was not great. So here's the deal. If you love this book and if you love Susan Elizabeth Phillips, we have nothing against you. We support you.
There's just
but
no
I don't think
nostalgia
you're gonna
glasses here.
Yeah, you're not going to like what we have to say at all. Yeah, so go enjoy your life. We love you. We'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's lots of things in the back catalog. Enjoy yourself. Go listen to Dark Lover. That was a very entertaining episode because Mel hated it and I was nostalgia loving it, you know?
Yeah. And Erin and I recapped one Susan Elizabeth Phillips book, and like, we didn't like it, but I don't recall wanting to set things on fire after reading it. And so that could be a fun one. But I do remember the same amount of malevolent thinness that came through that book. And at the very least, I just feel like that might be who Susan Elizabeth Phillips is as a person, especially, I guess, in 1994 when she originally wrote this book.
Yeah.
Everybody, if you've listened to the podcast before, there's a good chance you know that I am a little bit sensitive to thin culture coming through in books. And this wasn't thin culture coming through in books. This was blatantly categorizing good people as thin and fit and bad people as overweight or pudgy or, all the business.
Yeah, fat as a morality.
Yes.
Or an ethical.
Yeah. And even more than that, it came through in just like regular ass descriptions that had absolutely
out of nowhere.
No need. Yeah, the one I'm thinking of specifically is when she says something and the description of how she said it was with enough saccharin to supply a Weight Watchers convention.
Yep.
Why did we have to do that, Susan Elizabeth Phillips? I wonder. Why would we want to even? I wonder. So that is going to be a big thing in this episode. If you are also sensitive to malignant thinness, malicious thinness, this might be a tough episode for you. And it's definitely going to be a tough book.
If you're sensitive to sexual assault.
Wow. I'm going to just say you got to turn it off because
yeah,
I am actually, usually, I am not that sensitive to descriptions of sexual assault. And I think there's a couple of different issues with it that compound it in this book. But I've said it before, subgenre matters.
Yep.
If I walk into a mafia book, if I walk into a dark book, I have made a pact with the author. I understand that there are going to be very dark elements, and I have given my consent, especially if they're writing in an age where they give trigger warnings at the front of the book. There are absolutely zero trigger warnings in this book, even though it was republished in 2013.
I mean, trigger warnings weren't popular at the beginning of books in 2013 either. By the way, listener,
Weren't they?
Supposedly this book was republished in 2013, but I found data that it was originally published in 1994.
But at the same time, how was it not written in 1982? You know what I mean? Like with the amount and boldness of all the bullshit in this book.
Okay, I'll put it this way because, okay, listener, if you have been around for a while, before I was ever even officially co-host, Mel and I did The Bride, and I made the comment that I went into that book with a wary mind and an open heart because I knew what time it was written in. That was a book where my trust was rewarded, right? It was definitely of its time, but it was still delightful. This is an example of a book where my trust was aggressively curb stomped.
Sure.
Yeah, it was rough. This book was rough. Especially, I think almost the worst thing about this book to me is it was a whiplash book where it was so fucking awful. And then there would be something that I loved.
And it was normally, both times that I'm thinking of, it's normally an actual assault that then in the same chapter she tries to get me to enjoy the kiss they share afterwards. Or like she goes from the heroine literally trying to run out into the hallway naked because she said stop so many times to one of the most beautiful
consensual sex scenes I've ever read in my life.
And here's the thing. I think that's why it makes me even more mad. Because it's clear
she's
that
capable.
Susan Elizabeth Phillips fucking understands consent. And yet she abused me as far as my consent is concerned. And we'll get into it in chapter 3 or 4. But like, I did not consent to some shit that she did to me. And then tried to pass off as like normal stuff later. She understands consent and she made serious choices to not Like, I'm just so mad.
Listener, we're kind of giving you an overview of what the next hour and a half of us talking about this book is going to be, so that, like, honestly,
Yeah.
you could listen to this first 15, 20 minutes of the episode and know exactly what.
Yeah, no, listen, I, Melody, want you to be able to make informed decisions. If you want to keep listening, fuck yeah, let's go on this ride. But if
Yeah.
this tone is not what you need right now, I want you to be able to check out. The other things that we haven't quite explicitly said is there's going to be a metric fuck ton of slut shaming.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
a metric fuck ton of Madonna horror complex.
Mhm.
There's a metric fuck ton of kink shaming.
Oh my
while
God.
also managing
It
to
was
like
the-
celebrate kink, but then
Is
also
that
shame
not
it
the craziest
into
thing,
oblivion?
Mel?
Yes, this is what I'm saying. I'm so mad.
So one of the things that boggles my mind about this book is that, so you made the very good note that subgenre matters, right?
Yes.
Because there are so many things in this book that in a different context, I would have eaten up with a spoon, right? Like the scene in this book is so fucking awful, and in another book would have been fantastic, to the point where a couple of times I finished the scene enjoying and then remembering where I was.
Yeah.
Right?
And then feeling really fucking gross with yourself.
Uh-huh.
Listen, you're right. If this had been if this wasn't a straight up hetero contemporary sports,
Yeah.
if that wasn't the premise I walked into this with, I still don't know if I would have been okay because of the level of graphic in the moment craziness that happened, and even the level of detail of the descriptions of past assaults.
That's what my issue was in those scenes.
Yeah, and for me, I think in a dark book, I would have been mostly okay, or at least I would have like girded myself, you know? But because this came out of nowhere, I actually had to close my office door because for the first time in what I feel like is months, I was just sobbing at my desk. Like tears streaming down my face as she's being assaulted on page. And again, I'm not actually that sensitive to essay descriptions, you know?
Yeah. We're going to end up getting into some pretty deep shit in this book that
Yes.
it's one of those things where it's really hard to talk about in a lot of ways, but it's something that for me personally, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. In some ways it's empowering to talk about it. And I know that ultimately we have a safe space, right? And I'm not going to go hella into detail. The book does it enough. But like the second thing, and I know that I've kind of gone off on a couple of tangents from my original thing like 5 minutes ago about how I have two things to say. The second thing is
no worries.
so one of the unspoken contracts within a romance novel, as far as I'm concerned, is that by the end of the book, no matter where you start, by the end of the book, you are rooting for that couple. There's some sort of
Yes.
redeeming something about the characters. There was no redemption. I don't want these people together. I don't think they should be together. I hate
No.
him. I have
There's not enough
conflicting
growth.
feelings about her. And
Oh, that poor thing. Well, and like in Susan Elizabeth Phillips's defense, are you ready for this? In the book's defense, it does say that he is a misogynist in the blurb. The book description
does it really?
describes him as a misogynist.
Shut the fuck up. It does not. Hang
Yes.
on. I have to confirm this.
It does. And like while you're doing that, I want to talk about another really quick contract that people come in, because when I look up this book on Amazon right now, it has this bright yellow cover with like a lady. I think there's balloons involved, and I don't know why there are balloons because I don't actually recall any balloons in the book. But it's this very clearly like I'm a sweet rom-com contemporary romp. You should come in this expecting roses and lilies and hijinks.
And then the other cover that is literally just tits and lingerie.
Yes, then there's a
or like some
tits
kind of
cover.
camisole.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's literally just like from the clavicle to below the bust. That is the whole frame. Just like tits. Yes, read it to them. Read it to them right now. Read it to them. How wild is that? that?
It Had to Be You by Susan Elizabeth Phillips.
Also, it didn't
Book
at all.
1 in the Chicago Stars. What if a woman who knows nothing about sports inherits a professional football team? The Windy City definitely isn't ready for Phoebe Somerville. The outrageous knockout. I'm sorry, do the people really? Okay. The outrageous
New York.
I know, but what? Anyway, the outrageous York knockout who's taking over their hometown team. And Phoebe is definitely not prepared for the Stars' head coach, Dan Calebo, a sexist jock taskmaster with a one-track mind. This is the book that began it all. The Chicago Stars are about to take the field, and they're not the only ones playing for keeps. A sexist jock I would have gone into this book with different expectations if I'd read this synopsis.
Maybe. I still would have hated it.
I would have hated it still, but
And at the very least, I would have been let down because if you describe him that way in the blurb, I'm going to need a metric fuck ton of growth by the end. And there's a little bit of growth.
That's the thing. There's a little bit of
There's
growth,
a little bit of growth.
There's no redemption. Like, I don't like him. I don't like him. I don't want her to be with him, but frankly, like...
No, I don't.
Frankly, she doesn't need to be with anybody. She needs to be with a therapist, is who she needs to be with.
I know, I love her so much. Yeah. No, but you know what? Here's the thing. The issue I have with the hero's arc and his growth from the beginning of the book to the end of the book is that at the end of the book, he is still sexist.
Yes!
The growth is he no longer views her as an object, and she is the one woman in the world that he views as a person and a person with agency and a person with ideas, but that does not at all apply to any other woman that also exists in the world.
I'm so sorry. You know how you read a book that you love, right? And then you go look at the reviews and there's a bunch of like 1 or 2 star reviews where you're like,
yeah.
I don't know. We must have been reading completely different books. I'm having the exact opposite. I just scrolled. People love this book. Like recently, they read it for the first time recently. And I don't understand. But you know what? And hey, I
love it. I love that for them.
I love that too, because ultimately, I know we've said it before, like we're not here to yuck people's yums, right? We are. Like,
no.
If you're still here right now, we gave you the very first thing we said in this episode is do not fucking listen to this. If you like Susan Elizabeth Phillips, if you liked this book.
We've said it over and over again. I will defend your right to love this book.
And God knows, I love books that...
Oh God, very questionable stuff.
Oh yeah.
We love.
Oh yeah, but
Golly
it's
gee.
not some like the questionable things in the books that I love that other people hate. Like it doesn't hit
your pain points.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's the thing. So, okay, I've read some reviews recently of the podcast that are very valid. And one of the things I'm thinking of in general is that some people feel like we've gotten like too nice or too careful in our reviews of books. And in a couple of the different, and a couple of the things that, and I think it's totally valid. In a couple of the things that I've read, they've chalked it up to us being like too close to the industry or like us having too many romance writer friends or whatever. And I just want to make it clear that from the beginning of the podcast, Aaron and I, if we knew for a fact that it was an indie baby author, we wouldn't publicize that we were going to review it just in case we didn't like it. Because Heaving Bosoms does not believe in, punching down, right? Like taking somebody who has a smaller platform than we do and telling people that they're terrible, because they're not, right? They're just not books for us.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Susan Elizabeth Phillips is doing fucking fine. Her platform is way bigger than ours. She is a giant in the industry, and that is for a reason, you know? But this is, at the end of the day, it's still a reader podcast. And in this kind of case, I don't mind coming at Susan Elizabeth Phillips because she's fine. I'm not punching down at that point. I'm not even punching laterally. You know what I mean?
Yeah. This is an old man yelling at Sky, right? Like the Sky doesn't care.
And to the people who think that one of the reasons is because we have too many romance writer friends, I think it's not necessarily related to that, but I think that we have a much more keen understanding of the power of our platform in a way that when we thought 5 people were going to listen to the podcast, we didn't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So at the very least, I want to make sure that I give every caveat, because this is going to be my personal opinion. It comes with all of my history. It comes with all of my baggage. It comes with all of my bullshit, right? And that is going to be different for everybody. I don't judge people who love this book because I can see why a lot of people would.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, like we've both said, there are parts of this book that are phenomenal. I get why people love Susan Elizabeth Phillips. That me too. I would be so much less angry if the book was heinous from beginning to end.
Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. If it was tone deaf from beginning to end, abso-fucking-lutely. I would be like, I don't like that book, and that's it. That's it. There's no conversation there. But I want to light things on fire after I read this book.
By the way, that's very interesting because as a listener, what y'all said did affect me as a fan, right? I was hyper aware of that. And so I've been actively working over the last year, and you've been so fucking helpful, Mel, in like my own personal growth with being able to say, no, I don't like that. Like I didn't like that because I was nervous about putting that out in the world, because like at the very least, if it's a positive thing, then like
there's no harm.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I want to avoid.
Yeah, and I agree. And like, it's very interesting because this might be a little bit of the turning point. Because like, guess what? There's a lot of bad shit in this book.
There's a lot of harm done by this book to me, Melody. And so we have to talk about it.
And
all
me
right.
too. Let's go. We're fucking...
Here we go. So when we enter this book, we're at a funeral. And we've got Phoebe Somerville. She is a blonde Jessica Rabbit. And she has gone to the funeral with her gay best friend who is posing as her scandalous lover. And she's being very over the top about like what a black sheep she is in the family, because she really was. Her dad owned a football team and he was a red meat, steak only. I don't like women. I don't believe women, and anything that I don't completely agree with is a travesty that I'm not interested in. And he was incredibly abusive to Phoebe when she was younger. He's the one who gave her the extreme weight complex that we're going to witness through the rest of the book. And he disowned her at a certain point. We find out later on it's because he didn't believe when she told him she was SA'd. And it's like a whole thing, right? So she's coming back for the funeral. Everybody's like, OMG, the black sheep returns. And like, she's artsy, okay? She worked at an art gallery one time.
Well, and she also had an affair, supposedly, with an artist 40 years her senior. And we find out later that she was essentially his beard.
And his muse.
But as far as the world is concerned, she's having sex and with an artist 40 years her senior. And how old is she in this book?
She's 33. When she was with the artist, she was like, I think like 21 and on. Yeah. And her tits are all over the world in museums and art galleries because he painted her naked all the time, which is terrible. What a slut.
And don't worry though, listener. The misogyny is not just in character voices. It's also just in the book itself. Because we hear not in dialogue about how thick she is, and then immediately body shamed all other women by saying she's what a woman should look like.
How does that work, Sabrina, I wonder?
Why? Because she's constantly hating the fact that she is as thick as she is?
Oh, yeah. She's constantly saying that she has to lose at least 10 pounds to even be witnessable.
Oh, but don't worry. When she steps on a scale, if she accounts for 9 pounds of clothing, she's exactly where she wants to be. Yeah, it's back and forth between whether or not she's like the ideal female specimen or a hideous fat lump that shouldn't ever be seen in public.
And this is one of the things that I cannot grasp about Susan Elizabeth Phillips, because she obviously understands the conundrum that women are in as far as society's standards for their bodies and the way that the beauty standard changes depending on the culture and the woman and the body type and the skin color and all the bullshit. And yet she still manages to perpetuate it while subtly critiquing it. Like, what the fuck is happening right now? I feel like I'm being gaslit the whole time.
Yeah! We got gaslit by this book. That's exactly what happened.
I mean, and I don't use that term lightly. Like, I know what gaslighting means.
No, and so just to like finish up, basically she has a shitty relationship with her dad. He's always he has literally to her face told her, "You are my greatest failure." And like told her how much of a disappointment she is. And so she's basically just at this funeral. God knows why, frankly. Like, why are you at this funeral? And it's
Great question.
It's because she always craved his acceptance.
It's because she's a good person. She's a nice person. And she knows that he's fucking dead. And there's a little piece of that daughter inside that is always going to miss him no matter what. And that's completely understandable.
Yeah, it tracks.
So then in the second chapter, Susan Elizabeth Phillips comes out swinging with her backstory. And this is a big, giant trigger warning for sexual assault and...
Mel, I feel like we just, like, blanket trigger warning. If we trigger warning all of the scenes that are about to happen...
Can't.
Like, this is, listener, this is the last and final trigger warning for sexual assault, for rape, for misogyny, for fat shaming, slut shaming, like anything to do with any of that.
We did it at the front, right?
Yeah, and this is your last turner. Like, we love you. Take care of yourself, okay?
Please.
Like, this is not us taking it lightly at all. Like, this is not us being like, yeah, there's a little bit. No, this is like neon lights. Turn this off if that's something that you can't handle. And also don't fucking read this book because the descriptions in this book are so much worse than this podcast is about to be.
They're harrowing.
Yeah. So chapter 2, she gets the will read, right? And it turns out her dad is basically giving her like 6 months to be the head of the team before it goes to her fucking shitty, terrible cousin Reed. And she has a letter from him. Oh my God. And it says, "Dear Phoebe, as you know, I regard you as my only failure. For years, you've publicly humiliated me by running around." Oh, big trigger warning also on words used in this book. There are
and homophobia,
racism.
Oh God.
And yeah, so just
there's exactly 3 good men in this book. 3 of them. And even one of them crosses some consent lines.
Is it Ron?
There's Ron. There
Victor?
is
No. I guess
no, Victor sucks.
No, Victor's awful.
No. And Hat.
Oh, Bobby, Tom.
And the one black person, the one black man. Darnell that we see in the book. Those are the 3
don't
good
worry,
men.
the one black man does get some really don't worry, we're going to talk about it.
Everybody's still super racist about him. I'm talking about him, period.
No, he's fantastic. And like his love of his life, Chantel, maybe?
Yeah, I think.
Something like that. I don't know. He's delightful.
It was an audio.
So anyway, yeah, just
everybody else is the worst.
Just warning on that because I just came across one of the words and it's about to come out of my mouth. So sorry, friends. 4 years, you've publicly humiliated me by running around with all those but I'm not going to let you defy me any longer. For once in your life, you're going to do what I tell you. Maybe this experience will finally teach you something about responsibility and discipline. The game of football makes men out of boys. Let's see if it can make a woman out of you. Don't fuck this up too. Bert. By the way, I would like to actually make a comment. This is going off a little bit on a tangent. But I just feel like it's something necessary to say.
Yeah.
Specifically because there are ways to make it clear that somebody is homophobic.
Yes.
Or racist. And I'm just going to talk about it from a homophobia standpoint because that's something that I can directly identify with. I've experienced it. This is just a note to all authors. You can make it clear that somebody is homophobic or racist without using words like
that are traumatizing.
Yeah.
Without re-traumatizing people.
You could have made it very clear that this man was homophobic without dropping
Oh, yeah. That's debilitating to a lot of people.
You could have made it very clear that he was a homophobe without using that terminology. And I understand that this book was written in 94, but still, just letting everybody know, right? PSA.
Yeah.
Because like I stopped dead when I tell you I was listening to this book on audio, and when that word came into my ears, I literally wasn't my brain blanked.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh my God. What?
Yeah.
I was literally in shock. Anyway, so there's that letter. He's great dad, obviously. And then we have...
and like, second of all, like, it doesn't even track for that character. I'm so sorry. He would never let her anywhere near having power over his football team. Like, I didn't understand
this at all.
Any of that, but we're fine. It's the premise, cool, whatever. And then after this 6 months, if the team wins the AFC championships, then she gets to keep the team foreversies. Because apparently then she will have been not a failure anymore. But if the team loses, then it is ripped from her fingers and given to her terrible cousin
Reed. And she gets $100,000.
Yes, and he was expecting to inherit the team outright from the beginning. So Reed is smarmy and terrible.
We get our first really traumatic description of something, of the book.
And like, why did this happen? Why did it also have to be child sexual assault?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Basically, Reed had, like, they're young, preteenish, early teens kind of thing. Maybe she's not even 10. I don't know their ages, frankly.
She's really young and he's too old to do any of this.
Yeah, and basically he's, like, holding a picture of her dead mother over her and being like, if you want this picture, then pull down your pants and show me your privates.
And you're in her body.
Yeah, and this is also, like, a bazillion page. This scene never ended, and it just kept getting worse. And I was like, this has to end at some point. And then don't worry, it does end. And we immediately have a rather descriptive scene of her talking about how traumatic that was. And then also how traumatic the time she got raped in high school was.
And once again, we see her walk into that dark shed, and we're told how it feels when whoever it was, like, grabs her in all the business, and the way that she screamed and screamed and screamed and screamed, and nobody heard her. And it's
rough.
Like, the child part of it ends without her. Like, it ends without her taking off her underwear, which I appreciated, but at the same time, the way that you're in her body while it's happening and while she's grappling with this decision of either pulling down her pants or having the only picture that exists of her mother torn up into 18 tiny pieces that she can't tape back together is absolutely harrowing. And then we go straight into this incredibly descriptive, penetrative rape scene.
Yeah. And then we find out that the reason she left is because when she went to her dad about it, her dad was basically like, why would Craig, the star quarterback, be interested in fucking you at all?
Yeah, you're too fat for that. You're too fat and ugly. Why would he want that?
So she runs away to Paris. And then we zippy zap. And we meet our hero, who's a working man's quarterback, not one of those fussy pansy men.
Dan hated champagne, not just the sissy taste, but the way those silly glasses felt in his big battle-scarred hands. Even more than the champagne, he hated the idea of that blonde bimbo with the drop-dead body owning his football team.
Mm-hmm. And then we continue on where we keep learning about Dan, and specifically the kind of woman Dan is looking for. Because at this point in his life, He wants a flour-dusted cookie bacon baby making woman. After more years of raising hell than he wanted to count, he was in a serious settling down mood. At the age of 37, by the way, important note, this man is 37 years old because we're going to get to a scene that Mel and I both almost DNF'd the book over. At the age of 37, he yearned for kids, blah, 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 blah. He was on the brink of turning over a new leaf. No more career women. No more glamour pusses. No more sex bombs. He had his eyes out for a down-home woman, the kind who'd enjoy having a toddler mess up her hair, a woman whose idea of high fashion was a pair of blue jeans and one of his old sweatshirts, an ordinary kind of woman who didn't turn heads and make men crazy.
So here's the thing, right? In a good percentage of my life, you could describe me like that. Like, I baked bread yesterday. You know what I mean? Like, I have 2 children that I absolutely adore.
I have literally
I can't dress up for the
you
life of me.
Cookie baking.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
And you've definitely made babies.
I have. Yeah.
But also, guess what, listener? We like to occasionally be a glamour puss and a sex bomb.
Right.
It's almost like you can be both.
It's almost like women can contain multitudes.
And that it's not a moral failing
Yeah.
to look and feel sexy every once in a while, whatever that feels like and means to you.
It's almost like it's not my problem whether or not men turn their heads or I make them crazy, because that has absolutely nothing to do with me and entirely to do with those fictional men.
Yep.
So like that part of it is not what upsets me. What upsets me is his Madonna horror complex, his slut shaming, even though he doesn't like live his life as a slut shamer, really. Like, it's so confusing. And then also just the objectification of women. He's like, he's not saying, I can't wait to find a woman who has like these idiosyncrasies, and he's not looking for an individual. He's looking for a piece to slot into his life.
He's looking for a traditional homemaker. That's what he's looking for. But in the worst kind of way. Somebody who is essentially has like, this is not a choice. You know what I mean? Like,
he's looking for an automaton.
Yeah. And the fucking worst part of this, and he kind of acknowledges this later in the book, but it's never acknowledged in a way that made me feel better about it, is he realizes that he doesn't actually want that.
No.
He doesn't like the lady he finds. He thinks that she's annoying and he can't handle how meek and submissive she is. He likes a firecracker, sex bomb, puss baby lady, glamour, whatever.
One of those glamour pusses.
He just wants a glamour puss that doesn't flash her puss all over and fuck anything that moves. Guess what?
Well, no,
that's
he
a
wants
lot
a glamour
of glamour
puss.
pusses.
Yeah, he wants a glamour puss who it dresses in a burlap sack the rest of her life, unless she is glamour pussing specifically for him. That's what he wants. So, all right, here's the conflict at the beginning of the book. Phoebe resents this fucking ridiculous thing that her dad has done to her, even beyond the grave. And so she's checked out. She's like, I'm on vacay. I don't give a shit about this team. I don't want anything to do with it. Go fuck yourself, everybody. And so the general manager has quit out of frustration. Dan is in like a terrible situation because he can't get any of his players' contracts signed. And like, it's legitimately a shit show over there in football land. But like, the way that he describes it is, thanks to the disappearing bimbo, Dan Calebo was in danger of losing 3 of the most promising players in the league. And because the general manager, who was like a steak-eating man's man, quit out of frustration, the acting general manager, who that dude loved, who that dude fought to have on his team, he's like a sissy boy who is short. Man, is he short. And he's meek. And he's not a man.
And he's emotionally intelligent.
And how can anybody with emotional intelligence make good football decisions? You know what I mean? If you have to actually like listen to somebody and they're not shouting directly in your face,
Oh, don't
are
worry.
they even saying anything?
The
Dan
beginning
Keelbaugh
in the next chapter, I
wonders.
have a quote specifically
Oh,
about
good.
how he feels
Well,
about
let's go
this.
there.
Well,
Oh, no, we can't.
We can't yet because don't worry, he leaves this party. And
Wait. I'm so sorry. Wait, quickly, just for listener. Up until this point, he's been scoping out the ladies in the room. And like there's a congresswoman that he's been fixated on. She has not given him the time of day. And she's one of those career woman mistakes that he's made in the past, all right? And like there's never been a flower dust on her in her life. And then there's other women who are like throwing their numbers at him and pawing over him. And he's like, I'm at the place in my life where like it's woman to marry time.
we also find out that this congresswoman later, or like it's never on page, but like this is his ex-wife who he's acknowledging as a sexy woman in this room.
Yes. Yeah. So now he leaves.
He
and
leaves
he drives
this
his
party.
fucking Ferrari.
He
and
goes to
Susan Elizabeth
7-Eleven.
Phillips. Wait, but first Susan Elizabeth Phillips tries to get on my good side by telling me that he donates just as much money as he spends. And like, you don't get a fucking medal for that when you're making $8 million a year. You don't get a fucking medal for that. I'm sorry. There are so many things like basic consent that SEP wants me to give him a fucking medal for, and I'm just not gonna. Sorry. Okay.
Oh yeah, he doesn't
Now
even
he's
get a
at
medal for the
7-Eleven.
scenes I love, right? Because the rest
No.
of the book, he's so fucking awful.
Well, and the scenes I love are just actual genuine, like, that's just being a person who understands how not to abuse people.
Yeah.
Like, at the end of the day, it really honestly is the bare minimum.
Basic human
because-
decency is not a gold star action.
Right. And because the heroine has so much sexual trauma, she looks at it like he's this fucking unicorn of a wonderful man. And like, no, it's just normal stuff that should be normal. Okay. Now that he's at 7-Eleven. And this is when Susan Elizabeth Phillips did something to me.
No, same. I almost DNF'd this book. Even I didn't give a shit that it was a 5-star read. I like a 5-star rec. I almost texted you and was like, Mel, we're breaking the rule. We cannot read this. I refuse. I
No.
refuse.
So he walks into this 7-Eleven and there's this 16-year-old girl who's bubblegum smacking and wearing a cheerleader or something or other, and her skirt's so short and she's
very
got so much
creepily
makeup
described
on.
as very sexy. The 16-year-old the 16-year-old is just like actively described as attractive and sexy on page, and it gave me the ick so fucking, especially because like this, all I could think, this is my sister's age. Like,
I mean,
I
had a freeze response.
I did too. I
Like,
was
at the end of
literally
this
listening
scene-
in shock.
Yeah, I was in the middle. I was trying to move something from my sound booth to my desk, and at the end of the scene, I realized I had just been standing in the middle of the room, staring at a spot in the distance, frozen with this thing in my hand. Okay, so then she comes over to him, and she's like, "You're a really hot guy, and I'm done with boys, and I want to do it with a man who knows. I'm driving my dad's car. Do you want to follow me home?" And he's like, "And what would we do there, darling?" And she's like, have sex. And he's like, "Yeah, howdy doody. Let's get on. Let's go to there." So he follows this child home.
My
goes
notes.
into the... Yes, please.
My notes are, do not fucking tell me that this 37-year-old man is actually going home with a 16-year-old from 7-Eleven right now. I'm about to lose my shit if that's the case. My next note is, oh my fucking God, what the hell? He's actually fucking a 16-year-old on page. I don't know if I can do this. And then my third note is, oh my sweet fucking God.
Wait. Don't tell them yet. Don't tell them yet.
Oh, you wanted to share more about this horrifying, non-consent between the reader and the author scene? Yeah, go for it.
Yes, I do. I'm sorry. This was a thing that was done directly to me, and I have to be heard about it. So she goes into, they go into the house and they stand at the counter, and she takes off her panties in the middle of the kitchen. And I think he might describe the panties. And then she takes him to not her bedroom, but like a study that's obviously quote unquote her dad's study. And then she starts unbuttoning her shirt, and then we see 16-year-old boobs,
Mhm.
and then he touches the 16-year-old boobs, and he tweaks them a little, like he does nipple play on 16-year-old boobs in front of me, and then he fingers her
Mhm.
on the desk in front of me, and then he puts her ankles up on the desk so that he can look at her sweet 16-year-old get out of their vagina, get out of that vulva. It's 16, it's a child. And then he sits down, and then her 16-year-old hand is like on his cock and talking about how big it is and how she wants it to hurt. And then the 16-year-old is like, I'm sure I've done something wrong. You should probably spank me. And then he
does?
and then he does. And then she impales her 16-year-old body on him. And then he comes inside her, probably, I think. Or maybe inside the condom. I don't know at this point.
As they're
No,
coming
it is.
together, raw, there's a phone call that comes through.
Well, no, wait. And first, he's hitting her too hard now. Because now he's thinking about his ex-wife and how she said something bad about him in the press. And so he's smacking this 16-year-old girl who has nothing to do with his personal life so hard that she's wincing and obviously not okay with it and telling him that he's gone too far. And then he's like, no more of this stuff in the papers, no more talking about the divorce and stuff. And so I think that he is taking this 16-year-old and role-playing, punishing his ex-wife.
Yep.
Then a phone call comes through. Please carry on.
Then a phone call comes through, and we find out that this ex-wife is the 16-year-old, and that this is some kind of role play.
This has been a fucking game the whole time.
Mel, there are ways.
I'm shaking right now.
I would not have been happy about this scene, period. But there are ways that this scene could have been written that did not make me as viscerally and deeply uncomfortable as it did. Especially while we are under the impression that this is a 16-year-old, you do not need to be telling me how sexy, graphically, how sexy and hot and what you're doing to this 16.
I don't need to know what a 16-year-old nipple feels like. I don't want to.
I don't need to know what a 16-year-old grabbing up all on your junk feels like. I don't need to know what she looks like. I don't need to know how perfect and pretty and pink her pussy is. This is not... The entire thing was disgusting.
Here's the thing. We find out later in the book that Susan Elizabeth Phillips and her editor and whoever the fuck published this obviously understand what consent is. And yet, they did this to every single reader without our consent on any level.
Mm-hmm.
I did not walk in to a Guardian Ward book. I did not walk into a dark romance.
I did not walk into a forbidden love. I didn't walk into taboo. I didn't. Guess what? I
didn't give you consent to fucking do this to me.
I just recently read a book between a 49-year-old and an 18-year-old, and he was into her before she turned 18. Loved the book. Guess what?
You understood what was happening.
One, I was expecting this also, guess what? Nothing happened until she was 18. And there are so many things wrong with this whole entire thing. It's heinous.
So we find out that he is not a sexual predator, but I still had that experience.
By the way, of note, the fact that I believed he was doing it. I believed, just based on this is the end of chapter 3, and the fact that within 2.5 chapters, it's not that I was learning about him, it's that this scene started, and I was like, it tracked that this person was going home and fucking graphically a 16-year-old. That's a problem.
Here's the other thing. So this manages to be kinky. It could have been kinky goodness if written in a way and explained at the beginning that it was kink. It could have been a perfectly normal, great, get your rocks off together, do it in a healthy way because this book was written in the middle of the AIDS epidemic. And so one of the things I really appreciated about it was that everybody was very concerned with condoms and sexual health.
The way that this book handled STIs and the AIDS epidemic was fucking fantastic.
It was beautiful.
What?
And one of the reasons that they're still having sex with each other, even though they've been divorced for a year, is because A, they're both very high profile and they don't need shit sold to the tabloids. And B, they know for a fact that both of them are healthy. They know for a fact that both of them have been very recently blood tested and have not been with anybody else. And so all of these are incredibly healthy decisions, right? He is actively participating in this kink, which is solely her kink.
Yeah,
And
he's doing it for her benefit because she can't do it with other people because she's a congresswoman in 1990s. And, like, if anybody found out about this, she'd immediately be
crucified.
Yeah.
A scarlet letter bullshit. But at the same time, he does still manage to shame her about the kink he's actively participating in because he's like, did we have to, you know, did
do
she
the
have
kitty
to
shit?
be kitty shit, even though he actively participated. And I appreciate that he's like GGG or whatever, but if you are, then you can't shame somebody for it. Either say your boundary up front and be like, she's an 18-year-old former cheerleader, period, the end, or I'm not participating, or you do it and you don't make people feel bad about it.
Also, of note, it is shown throughout the rest of the book that they are fully capable of a scene happening, right, with internal awareness of what is happening, and it's still the scene that it is. They could have very easily been stated before this all happened that he was like, even if just a throwaway line of, man, I really don't like this kitty shit, but like, if this is what she needs, and then it could have launched into it, and I would have been aware that something was up, right?
Something's happening.
There was no warning. And then don't worry, not only is he kink shaming her through all of, like, after this, he does in fact say to her, you women are really something, he sneered. When are you going to figure out that God might have made two sexes for a reason? You can't have it both ways. Either a man's a man or he's not. You can't take somebody whose nature is to be a warrior and then expect him at your command to curl up on the couch, spill his guts, and in general, start acting like a pussy. Because she made the very valid request that he show an emotion and discuss a single experience and emotion. But that makes you a pussy.
No.
He's a man's man. He's not one of those fussy pansy men.
He's not somebody who gets penetrated. He's the penetrator.
Yeah. So so then we zippy zap. He decides not to go home after a game, and instead he's in New York and he's going to go hunt down the woman who's fucking up his life.
I was like, okay, chapter 4, this is the worst that could possibly happen, obviously.
My note is, good God, this book is fucking sexist to shit. I don't know how I can do this. It can't get worse than this.
Well, and just like from a trauma standpoint, we've watched a childhood sexual assault, we've watched a violent rape in the moment, and now we've watched a statutory rape, but jokes, right? So I'm thinking to myself, I would DNF this, even if it was for the podcast, but
it can't get worse.
It can't. There's not more. Like, obviously now they're gonna meet each other, and then it's gonna be a regular fucking romance from here. So I'm just gonna grit my teeth and keep going. Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't think that, listener.
Well,
okay. So now
she gets home, and she had told the doorman that a man was coming to visit her. Turns out she was expecting Victor, her gay best friend, and so she gets upstairs. And by the way, and this is valid. Large, aggressive, possessive men make her deeply uncomfortable, especially sportsmen, which, like, fair.
Yeah.
You have trauma after trauma after trauma due to big, aggressive, possessive sportsman.
And I witnessed it vicariously.
Yeah.
With you.
Guess what? I'm also uncomfortable right now. So she gets up there and he's there. And I don't know if you've caught this, listener, but he is a big, aggressive, possessive sportsman. And so understandably, he makes her nervous.
In fact, in chapter 3, it literally says he was just as aggressive off the field as he was on. Like, that was a whole description in which he had been arrested multiple times for, like, beating people up and stuff. Like, all of the seeds have been planted here.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, he's here for a perfectly valid reason, because he cannot run his football organization without her signature on some really important papers, and she needs to get her shit together and do the things she has to do, or say goodbye to whatever money she might get and just say, fuck this and fuck everyone. I don't want to do this. I don't care about the will stipulations, right?
Yes.
Those are her two choices. So he shows up at her house to be like, hey, you need to come do your job. And she is like, no, I'm absolutely not going to do that. I'm not going to participate in any of the football.
Mm-hmm.
And then so he gets super pissed and he quits. And then her gay best friend gets there just in time to, like, get Dan back into the house. And this is when we find out that not even her gay best friend is really on her side, because he says, you must learn when to, because he's like, oh, she basically fired me. I gave her two choices, one of which was I quit, and she chose I quit. And then he goes, you must learn when to pay attention to Phoebe and when to ignore her. She is what you Americans call, he hesitated, searching for the proper phrase, a fuck up. And, like, this might be the best friend cosplaying to, like, ultimately help her get this guy on her side. But she doesn't know that in the moment. We're in her point of view. And she's like, what the fuck, Victor? How can you talk about me like that?
I would like to just make a comment, because that specifically hit me really hard, because I was a hot mess for a really long time. And through therapy and a lot of self-work, I stopped being as much of a hot mess, right? Like, we all have slips, but, like, in general, I'm doing pretty good. And I lost friends because they no longer looked good in comparison to me, right?
Right.
Like, I would, like, oh man, I may be I may be a mess, but, like, I'm not Sabrina, right?
Right.
And so all I could think is, those people would have said that to another, you know what I mean? And so, like, when I read that quote, it made me feel ill.
That's not a friend.
Yeah. I was like, fuck Victor.
And he's the
Fuck
one, and
Victor.
up until this point, I was thinking he's the one man who is on her side.
And I think that's why it hit me so viscerally, is, like, it reminded me of, like, years of thinking somebody's your friend and then realizing, oh, that's why they're here.
Yeah. That's what that felt like in the moment, in action.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the funny things we found about whatever the last SEP book we read, Aaron and I, was that the hero kept on, like, getting up from chairs like a snake. And I don't remember exactly what was said in the first book, but I highlighted this because it feels like a Susan Elizabeth Phillips gold standard. It says, he uncoiled so abruptly from the chair that he startled her into backing away. So even this guy gets up like a big snake. Anyway, sorry, everybody. So basically, she decides that she's going to go in, right? She's like, okay, I'll do what I need to do to make this happen. And, allegedly, by the end of this dinner, she, like, thinks he has an offbeat sense of humor, but I guess, like, she didn't prove it to me. That's for damn sure. Susan Elizabeth Phillips didn't write any dialogue that made me see he had an offbeat sense of humor, but that's fine.
Yeah.
So now, when she goes in, I think, Reed, her cousin, comes up to her, and he's trying to get on her good side. And one of the things he says to her is that even though he didn't believe her in the moment, because when she had to reveal this to her dad, he called Craig, the perpetrator, in, and Reed came with him. And so this poor woman had to then describe her rape again in front of the perpetrator, her incredibly judgmental cousin, and
Also
her
the cousin who
disbelieving dad.
freaking
Oh God, it
assaulted
was the same
her as
cousin
children.
who did the child essay on her. And so he's like, I didn't believe you in the moment, but then later on, Craig got drunk and he told me what really happened. He told me he'd raped you. And she's like, thank you, I guess, for acknowledging that. And he's like, I want to make this as easy for you as possible. And so I'm always here. And she keeps on saying that when she looks at him, is it that he has a hungry mouth? What is
Greedy
how
mouth?
does she describe his a greedy mouth?
Yeah.
I don't like it.
It's described multiple times that way, and it gave me this squick every time. We are only in fucking chapter 7. Like, I know we're gonna zippy zap, but so much happens in these first couple of chapters. And it was, you ever have that moment where you are unexpectedly confronted with things that hit really hard, but then the way that it's handled makes it feel better. It's almost healing, right? This book is the opposite, right? This book re-traumatized me in some ways, right? Like it's already brought up a couple of shitty things, but then in this chapter specifically, we learn about her history and how when she first disappeared to Paris, she spent several years letting men, fuck her and use her body because she had somehow, and we're not shocked by this, she had convinced herself that it was her fault that she got raped, and now everybody knows what kind of woman she is because of it. And so she would just let these men grunt and huff and fuck her and use her and do all of these things, and not in any kind of empowering way. But it was her desperately trying to take back that power. And she's doing this because, as far as she's concerned, this is the only thing that she's worthy of. Like, this is her purpose.
This is what she deserves.
Because she's just that kind of girl. And I can identify with that in a lot of ways, right? Like, I have my own sexual traumas from my past and things like that. And I did a very similar thing, and a very, you know what I mean? Where it's like, you have these experiences because you are desperately trying to take that control back when it was brutally ripped from you, right?
Yeah.
And it does, and when I say brutally, if you are listening and you are a survivor of any kind of rape or sexual assault, it doesn't have to be some big, gigantic, you got assaulted and were screaming in a fucking shed.
No.
In the dark, right? It can be small as far as...
A lot of times it's fucking subtle.
Yes. And you still have, like, this description, her entire experience, I've read other books where I had to, like, put it on pause because it hit too hard, right? But then the rest of the book was very healing to read, right? Like, their experiences, like, there was a Catherine Moon book that was similar. It wasn't because of sexual assault, but where, like, it was a whole thing. I don't remember. It was one of the monster brothel series, and I remember I had to hit pause because, like, it just hit a little too close to home at a point where I wasn't able to listen. But then the rest of the book was so fucking healing to read. Yeah, this book is the opposite. I read her experience, and, like, I noticed reading this book that I was having thoughts, like bad thoughts that I've gone to years of therapy to work through, right? And I was like, oh, this is a bad book. Like, or like, this is, depending on the person reading this,
harmful.
This is there, and it's so subtle too, because it's not like it is not that she doesn't feel this way and then it is somehow disproven by the end of the book. It is, she feels this way, and it never feels by the end of it like she is more than a sex bomb that is only good for sex, right? Except for, like, a 5-second look in the mirror, or like him looking in the mirror and being like, maybe, oh my God, maybe she is worth more than just some place to put my dick.
Yeah. And what's even more insidious about all of this, I think,
Mm-hmm.
or like additionally insidious about it, is that she clearly has this trauma. She outright tells us that that's the only thing she thinks she's good for.
Mm-hmm.
And then she is attracted to a man who, in reality, thinks that's all she's good for. She's not smart. She's a bimbo. She's got a great body, and that's what he's attracted to. And he hates himself for being attracted to her.
Mm-hmm.
He hates himself for it.
Mm-hmm.
He wonders why he can't be attracted to a good woman, one of those flower-dusted ones. He tries throughout the book to distance himself from her because she's worthless. She's just a good time gal in his mind. And he tries to date somebody that he looks at as like mother material and wife material.
It's insidious. The issues with this book, they're insidious, right? Mm.
So simultaneously, she's trying to prove to, because at this point, she's like, all right, fuck my dad. I'm going to prove him wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm going to put all my energy into doing this well, fucking proving him wrong. And then later on, she's like, I actually realized that I have to prove it to myself that he's wrong. And yet the whole time she's gravitating towards and being judged and gaslit and like whiplashed by this guy who is reinforcing the idea that that's all she's good for to her face.
Mm-hmm.
To her face. He says it out loud to her.
Yep.
More than once.
All the way through to the end. Up
It's
until like
wild.
he's saying that out loud, even as we're supposed to be third act rooting for them.
Yeah. So, okay, she goes to the stadium and he says some bullshit to her that makes her leave the room. She's going to stomp out. And then this really nice guy, Ron, who has been on her side since she met him in the elevator or whatever, has come out and been like, hey, I know that they're like really, it's tough with them, you know, and if you're not the exact same kind of people they are,
It's
they
a boys'
treat you
club.
like shit. Yeah, it's a boys' club and Dan is the president.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the end of it, he convinces her to sign the contracts they need her to sign. And then one of the stipulations for Dan coming back, because he quit, was we're going to fire the acting general manager. That happens. And then she finds out that Ron, the nice guy who is interested in connecting with her and speaking her language and explaining the toxic masculine culture that she has to swim through, he's the one who just got fired. And so they spend the next few chapters like playing these games and, you know, her not doing anything until Ron tells her it should happen, and she's not looking at new GM resumes and stuff. And then Dan finally gets impressed by Ron because Ron, like, quote unquote, grows a pair and sort of convinces Dan that he's sleeping with her.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, he's the only one who can talk her into doing anything sensible for the team. And so Dan gives him his job back, even though Dan is not the person who makes those decisions or that Ron reports to.
I'm not gonna lie,
Dan reports to Ron.
I was very confused about who was in charge.
What the fuck is happening right
hiring
now?
and firing. Yeah. And then a bunch of other things happen. But most importantly, we meet Dan's perfect flour dusted cookie baking baby making woman. And her name is Sharon. And she is nice. She's sweet.
She's a preschool teacher.
She's adorable and one of the only characters in this book that
is just lovely.
Not a single problem with. Yeah. Like
just lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. I want Sharon's book. I want Sharon and Ron's book because, spoiler, they end up together at the end of the book. That would be such a beautiful relationship.
I would love for somebody else to write it, though.
Oh, yeah.
'Cause I don't know that it would be.
I don't think that it would be done justice.
Yeah. So, okay. So now, like, they win or lose a game. Who knows?
No,
And then
so
they have a party at her house.
Importantly, it's all losses. Like, the team is just
Sure,
losing,
okay.
losing consistently. But yeah, it's now post-game party time, even though they lost.
Yeah. And they're at her house. They start, like, sort of flirting. And he's like,
Well, so she
because she takes on like a persona. Wait. But first, she takes on a persona when she's around people who are uncomfortable. And that is, everybody only believes me to be a Jessica Rabbit. And so I am going to be the personification of a Jessica Rabbit just to, like, you know, keep them basically away from me, you know, like to not have them think any deep thoughts about me or wonder about me. And so he has seen her, like, flirt with every dude around. Old, young, doesn't matter.
The
And then-
janitor, specifically, he states at one point, which I
Yeah, 'cause
had a
why would
problem with, because
anybody?
how fucking, like,
Why would anybody, Sabrina?
what's the problem with flirting with a janitor, Dan?
He's poor is the problem, Sabrina. He's fucking poor, Dan thinks. Why
He's
in
a
the
working
world?
class man. But guess what, Dan? You're the
I
working
can't.
class quarterback. Anyway.
I can't.
Yeah, and so she is uncomfortable, surrounded by all of these big, roughhousing, getting drunk football
Yeah.
men. And so she disappears to take a breather, and she finds Dan in an office or something like that, going over
No,
tapes.
it's in a hedge.
That's fucking weird as shit. I hard whimsied that.
Wait, aren't they at the party?
Yeah. He's like looking over tape and stuff because he has the
I
important
don't
part
remember
is
that.
he's looking over tape and things like that, and he's less intimidating because he's got his little readers on, his reader glasses.
Shit. Maybe they're not in a hedge.
And all
maybe
of a sudden,
maybe I made that up.
No, Mel, honestly, it makes the book better if canonically he's hiding in a hedge with his glasses watching tape.
Yes.
Okay? That makes me,
Yeah, I like that.
it's canon. He was
Yes.
hiding in a hedge.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have this little conversation where he acknowledges that he makes her nervous.
Mm-hmm.
And
She tries to deny it.
Mhm. And he is like, "You're a liar, darling. I make you nervous as hell." And then she puts on her little facade and
Right.
says, "Only in your dreams, lover. I devour men like you for breakfast and still eat a 5-course lunch." And he says, "Damn, Phoebe. I wish we liked each other better, because if we did, we could have ourselves a real good time." Because
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you remember, listener, but he does consider her nothing but a good time girl, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And she is struggling because she can't figure out why she's so drawn to this man, which is basically the antithesis of
He's all of her fears in one
Mhm.
body, right?
Yeah.
So she doesn't understand her attraction to him, but it's there, and like she's
Mhm.
thinking about him kissing her and stuff. But then thankfully, Ron is like, "Oh, there you are. I'm gonna head home. Thank goodness." Like blah blah blah, and he interrupts them.
Mhm.
So then, yeah,
Okay. So this episode could very much be us just bitching and complaining the whole time. I do have to share something I did think was fucking hilarious in this
yeah,
book.
please.
So she has a 15-year-old sister, Molly, who big issues, right? Like their dad basically like pitted them against each other and told Molly all the time about how like
How his other daughter was also worthless, but at least she stood up to him.
and like all sorts of stuff. So they're struggling, right? And Molly's 15. Like I get, you know what I mean? Like she just lost her dad, even though he was shitty. She's now stuck with a sister who has been very absent her whole life. Like I understand why Molly is struggling, right? So Dan meets Molly at the end of this party, and they're talking, and because he's looking for a phone, and they're talking, and she looks at him and she's like, "Yeah, well, Phoebe beats me. She won't let me go back to my old school. She beats me. She's abused. She's horrible." And he's just like, "Really? Interesting."
Wow.
And he's like, "She doesn't really seem like the type." And Molly's like, "Yeah, of course she is. Of course she is." And then the reason that it made me laugh is the rest of the fucking book. is like every time we see a Dan and Molly interaction, he's like, well, I mean, like, I can talk to her about the fact that she whoops you real hard. And Molly's like, no, it's fine. She doesn't hit me anymore. She doesn't even hurt. And like the only reason that it's funny is because Molly's a 15-year-old, right? Like this totally tracks. She's struggling. She hates her sister. She just wants to like get away from her, and she's just like, what's the worst thing that Phoebe can do? And it's beat me. But then but wait, there's consequences to me saying things like that.
Well, and specifically, I actually thought it was pretty illustrative because in the space that Molly has grown up in, she has probably like, you know, it's not been overt, but she has learned that the only way to get a man to like you is to put down another woman.
Yeah, that's another thing.
And that's exactly what she does with Dan. She's like, I want it. It literally says Molly wanted him to like her. And so she threw Phoebe under the bus, basically. So anyway,
I was just delighted by a 15-year-old being a 15-year-old, right?
Yeah. Petty AF.
Yeah. And like just blatantly lying. And then like
not thinking into the future at all. Not thinking 2 minutes ahead.
Yeah, because it's not funny. Like the idea of her sister beating her is not the entertaining part. Like the part that like touched me was Molly just being like, I'm just gonna throw some shit out there. And hopefully that works. And it's just such a teenager thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So when Ron left, he told Dan that like there was videotape from the game that could be coming to the party, but it would be later. And then Dan was like, just have him put it on my desk in the morning. It'll be fine. So then when she leaves, Phoebe has gotten hold of this tape. And she was like kind of excited about the fact that they were flirting a little bit. And like she didn't really understand like what it is. And she wants to figure it out. So she decides to go to his house and bring him the tape at like 1 a.m. So she gets in her car, she puts her tape, you know, she's looking at it and she's like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done. But like, here I go. She gets to his house, gets out of her car and like starts walking around the property. Is going to go to the front door, but like the house is all dark. She doesn't really know what to do. And then she's thinking to herself, oh my gosh, this is so dumb. I'm just going to get in my car and go away. And then a hand clamps over her mouth. And before she could react, a powerful arm grabbed her around the waist from behind. All the blood drained from her head and her legs buckled as she found herself pinioned. A menacing voice whispered in her ear, I'm taking you into the woods. She was paralyzed with fear. She tried to scream, but she couldn't make a sound. It was just like the night when she was 18. Her feet left the ground, and he carried her down the steps as if she weighed nothing. Blackness and panic suffocated her. He dragged her toward the trees with his mouth pressed against her ear. Fight me, he whispered. Fight me even though you know it won't do you any good. And then we watched this scene go on for pages, including him saying, that's good. You're putting up a good fight, sweetheart. You're making me work for it. She's literally screaming in his arms. He puts his hand up her shirt. He says more terrible things.
No, before he even puts his hand up her shirt, he shoves his hand down her panties.
Oh, shit.
And like this entire scene is him saying all sorts of stuff. And her fucking freaking out. And like awful sounds are coming from her. She's like groaning and crying and losing it. And then he releases her mouth and grabs the bodice of her dress and rips it open.
Yeah.
And then, quote, two things happened simultaneously. A violent scream erupted from her lips and the hand cupping her breast froze. Because from his point of view,
Val,
he thought it was his ex-wife. They had set up this basically exact scene, right? Like this was a thing that was going.
They had set up a rape fantasy,
which is fine.
Fine.
And then she showed up. Phoebe showed up.
It was dark.
And they look similar. They're roughly the same height. They're both blonde. And like,
I was sitting at my desk sobbing because then after this, there's just emotional whiplash because he feels terrible.
Mhm.
She is literally in the fetal position on the ground, sobbing her brains out. He's trying to make her feel better, but also knows that he can't do that because he, in this moment, is her perpetrator. And like,
which that level of self-awareness, he's like, Val, because Val shows up, his ex-wife shows up, and he's like,
And then
you have to
Val-
talk to her. There's no way that I can talk to her right now. I'm the one who just assaulted her.
right. And then Val is a fucking monster.
Oh my
All
God.
Val can think about is her congressional career and not the fact that she just accidentally set a woman up to be raped. And like she doesn't even ask her if she's okay. She doesn't give a shit. She sees this woman sobbing on the thing, and all she can think of is she gonna tell anybody about this? Because my political career will be over.
And then possibly, to me, one of the worst things about that, and this is one of those examples of a whiplash book, right? Where this scene happened. And like, I frankly understood the miscommunication, right?
Yes.
Like, it tracked, okay? And then his remorse and all of these things, and then him standing up for her to Valerie, like, fucking stop worrying about your congressional shit. There's a woman who's just been traumatized.
There's a victim sitting here.
Yes. And like, I was like, oh, because this is chapter 10. And so I was like, and there's 25 chapters in this book plus epilogue. And I was like, oh, this is the turning point. This is where it gets better. Like,
Yeah, it couldn't possibly get worse from here, Sabrina.
but then Valerie leaves.
He wants to do a debrief with her. And she's like, actually, no, thank you so much. I am going to leave right now.
And then he
And he's like, come on,
manipulates her.
we gotta talk about this. She won't. So he manipulates her into going inside by telling her that Molly accused her of abusing her.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, what? And he's like, I'm not going to tell you anymore unless you come inside with me.
Mhm.
Come into my lair with my big giant body that did just violently assault you, even though it was a whoopsie. And that's the only way I'm going to give you this information about your sister and whether or not she might have called CPS ?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what?
Yeah.
So she does.
And then
And he cooks for her.
well, and then
and they
he
have a-
and then he has a nerve to apologize to her for what happened between them because she's still obviously uncomfortable. And he says, "Are we always going to have this hanging over us?" Bro.
It's been 2 fucking minutes.
Yeah. And secretly in her head, she's thinking about how much it would be nice if he held her and reassured her that everything's okay. And I'm like, ma'am, well, like I am
Again,
not judging her. I
understand.
understand. But also like Susan Elizabeth Phillips, now's not the time. Right? Like,
Right? Like, just think of your reader, if nothing else.
yeah. And so then he makes some more comments about how clear it is that he makes her nervous because she buttons up around him.
But first, she makes sure to spend a lot of time subtly shaming Val by being like, so that's what you two are into? Ew. And he's like, actually, I'm not. She's the only one who's into it.
That
I'm
whole
not
conversation
at all.
was so fucking awful.
Yeah.
And then she bucks up and she's like, well, I'm not afraid of you. And what does he do?
He says, prove it. Fucking prove it.
How does he tell her to prove it? Mel, less than an hour after he assaulted her.
He didn't know what devil was prodding him. He only knew that teasing her made her smile, and he loved the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when that happened. And he says, give me a kiss right here, a friendly little smacker like one friend gives to another. And then she says, I don't want to kiss you. But he noticed she waited a few seconds too long to really make that believable. And then he says, liar. All this heat can't just be coming from me.
And then
And
she
then he
says,
starts- yeah.
we don't like each other. And he says, we don't have to like each other, honey. This isn't a permanent partnership. It's animal attraction. And it feels good. You feel good.
And if this scene had happened 15 pages later, after a week had gone by and maybe he had done something nice for her and, you know, said something about her that was good in a meeting maybe or something, this would be wonderful.
I was so
kind of.
angry at how hot this kiss was. I was so fucking
I just
angry
still-
about it.
I just still felt so
No.
gross in my whole body.
That's why I'm angry.
I know.
Is like this is it's a long description. It's a great kiss. And all I could think was SEP. Now is not the fucking time.
Why are you doing this to me?
And then at the end
don't
of it,
like
this is
that I
where
like this.
this is where it flip-flops, because at the very
mean-
end, he could feel her wildness matching his, her maniac hands digging into his arms, her hips pushing and thrusting against him, grinding. She was crazy as he was, and just as needy, and those sounds almost like fear, almost like he went rigid as he realized that she was trying to get away from him.
And then he shouts at her. He says, "I'm not apologizing again, God damn it! If you didn't want me to kiss you, all you had to do was say no." And then she says, "I'm sorry." She
Yeah.
whispers it. "I'm sorry."
Yeah, and she does, because she's not even arguing with him, and she lifts her hands in a small, helpless gesture that made him feel like the world's biggest bully. Guess what, Dan? You are a bully.
This was wild. And so she
And then-
leaves, thank goodness,
and
now.
Then we
Yeah.
zippy zap, because she does leave.
Yeah.
The next day, we hear all about how guilty she feels
Can I
about
please
the
read
night
it to them?
before. Absolutely.
It's one of the worst things I've ever read in my life. Why had she let him kiss her last night when she'd known that she wasn't woman enough to see it through?
Oh my God. Ugh.
She couldn't blame him for his anger. Both of them knew she had gone into his arms willingly. But when she had heard the hot rasp in his breathing, felt his strength, and known she couldn't control him, she had panicked. She looked down at the body that made up the lie of who she was. If her outside matched her inside, she would be flat-chested, scrawny, brittle from lack of moisture. What good were curvy hips and full breasts if she couldn't let a man caress them? If they would never bring a baby into the world or nurture its new life? She's worthless.
Guess what? Consent can be revoked at any point. Just a reminder. For any reason. You could have had a weird thought about a
Hamster!
hamster that made you feel weird, and you're like, actually, no more. Instead of having a legit trauma response after you were just assaulted.
Legitimately
Man
assaulted.
In the dark.
And the wild thing, listener, is that literally in the next chapter, Susan Elizabeth Phillips proves to us that consent can be revoked at any point and that Dan understands that.
Yeah. So we jump into the next chapter, right? And they're at an away game, and she's getting a drink with one of the only fucking good people in this book, Bobby Tom. And
even he's questionable.
I refuse. You know what? This is me purposefully pulling the curtain over my eyes. I refuse to read his book because I don't want to know.
No.
As far as I'm concerned, based on this book, like he's a fine little man with some, problematic manly man issues, but also like for the most part, not terrible, right?
Oh, really
in
quick.
comparison.
Yeah, really quick. In the last chapter, I just need them to understand the level of malicious thinness that's in this book. She gazed at the computer that sat in the corner of her desk. Can you set me up with someone who can teach me how to use this thing? And then Ron says, you want to learn how to operate a computer? Also, listener, right before this, she worked at an art gallery in which she sold high-end paintings to people. This bitch knows how to work a fucking computer. Or at the very least, she like understands what business is. And like the way that she's portrayed in the first, I cannot. Anyway, so it says, you want to learn how to operate a computer? And she says, why not? I'm willing to try anything if it's non-fattening. Besides, it might be fun to use my brain again.
Yeah.
And then in this one, she's having a drink with Bobby Tom, and she says she took another sip. Later, she would regret the calories, but not now.
Yeah, so she's getting this drink with Bobby Tom, and
he is the whitest Stetson-weariest. He is a sweet little colt, right?
Straight out of Texas, right?
Except the next thing, it made me laugh so hard because it says they talked about everything. They talked about Mexican food, whether sports teams should be named after Native Americans, and Bobby Tom's resemblance to Christian Slater. And I have never wanted two people's opinions less on whether or not football teams should be named after Native Americans. Who the fuck do they think they are? Your voice doesn't matter here, folks. Okay?
Oh my God.
Okay, now we have to get into another accidental rape.
Wait.
Another accidental sexual assault.
Wait, give me just a second, please. Oh my God.
So mad.
Oh my God, Mel, I fucking needed that so badly. I needed that so bad. I am parched in a desert of misogyny and sexual assault, and I needed that. This was my oasis. Thank you for that. I needed that halfway through this book. So we're gonna motor. So
she has had 2 margaritas that she will worry about later, okay, on her hips. But now Bobby Tom, is his name Bobby Tom? It's her. Yeah. He kisses her. Okay, this is also weird. I have a question about this. Mm-hmm. She's 33, he's 25. And according to Susan Elizabeth Phillips, Bobby Tom kisses her on the lips in a friendly way that a younger man might kiss his direct supervisor,
an older woman who, like, basically if the opportunity, he wants her but knows it'll never happen kind of thing,
are never gonna. This is just like a friendly smackaroo on the lipsicles between buddies. Is that a thing that happens in the world? I've never been randomly
multiple times in this book
by a dude who I've never been, that's never happened to me. I can think of maybe one time with one of my gay friends, but we were both hammered.
I'll put it this way. I have quite literally had sex with friends that I'm still friends with, and we do not kiss on the mouth randomly.
Right.
If there's anybody to have that kind of, comfort with,
sure,
we don't do that. Even Hammertown. It's not a friendly kiss. It's more of a, if we are Hammertown, sometimes it'll turn into a makeout, but
right.
That's not a friendly bus, you know?
Right. I don't understand. So he sees it and he freaks the fuck out and he shouts at Bobby Tom from across the lobby. And then he muscles her into the elevator. He basically drags her across the lobby and throws her into the elevator. Mm-hmm. And then she finds out that quite conveniently, his room happens to be right across from his, which is interesting.
And now they're in his room, and she has been wondering what it would be like to kiss him for chapters at this point.
And she's just drunk enough to figure out, to like get the courage or whatever it says.
Yeah, so she goes for it. She's a little bit bold. And then while they're kissing, she tells him, don't stop, even if I say no. And he is immediately frustrated because he's sick of all the kink and mind games that he thinks that she's giving him right now.
Wait, can I just read this part? Because it's like, I don't know that either of us can do it justice.
Yeah, go for it.
That SCP does.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
disgusting.
It's horrible.
She says, don't stop, she pleaded against his lips. No matter what I say, don't stop. Stunned, he pulled back from her, do you mean it? And she says, yes. Seconds ticked by as her words slowly registered in Dan's brain. Disappointment rushed through him, followed quickly by disgust and then cynicism. Why was he surprised? He should have learned his lesson from Valerie and realized what Phoebe had wanted all along. She was another woman who needed to play submissive games. All of her no's last Sunday had meant yes. She had been manipulating him, and he'd been sucked right in. Wearily, he gazed down at her lush curves, the soft sweep of the lashes framing those tilty-up amber eyes, the swollen lips, blah, 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 blah. Oh, suck me up mouth, gross. Was it too much to ask for just a simple, uncomplicated romp in bed? No mind games? And then he was suddenly furious. As furious as he'd been when he'd found Bobby Tom drooling all over her in the bar. And
oh, wait, but he does put actions. He's like, she'd probably, just because she's a sex bomb, she'd probably been feeling him up under the table, rubbing against him with those long, bare legs, brushing her centerfold tits against his arm, hitting him with a whole load of shit. Don't stop just because I say no, Bobby Tom. I really mean yes. And then he proceeds to blame Valerie for, quote unquote, warping him. And in his head, the misogyny in this book is so strong. It seemed as if the women in this country had gotten irredeemably screwed up when it came to sex. They either wanted to be stomping high heels into your chest or having you handcuff them to the bedposts. But then, get ready, after what she'd put him through, a little rough stuff with Phoebe Somerville might be just what he needed to get rid of those images of her that kept popping up in his mind at the worst times. Tonight, he would put an end to it. Whatever you say, baby.
Phoebe heard the edge of menace in Dan's voice, but she was feeling too good to let it frighten her. And it should have frightened her because, like, he throws her on the bed and she says, stop. He puts her arms.
And get this. The craziest thing about this is that they're making out, right? And she gets a little skittish and is like, starts to pull away, but he doesn't take stop. He doesn't listen, right? And she had requested that. And like, this is one of those examples of a scene where I have some words for Susan Elizabeth Phillips, because this is a scene where I hate his response, right? The way he feels inside and what is driving this is fucking terrible. But also,
but what he's doing is exactly what she asked for.
Exactly. And so he is not listening because guess what? She put that on the table, right? And
she told him that's exactly what she wanted.
But this is a great example of listener, this is why when you do kink, you need a safe word. Because don't stop when I tell you to stop. But if I fucking say petunia, you better stop that shit.
Yeah.
But obviously that's not happening in this scene. And he's thinking about how he's too old for this shit and he's annoyed, and they have this like oh my God,
he's so judgmental.
This was fucking awful though. So now he's like going at it, right? He's like touching on her and like all of these things.
Now.
He's rough. And he pulls his hand away
From her mouth, because she had it over her mouth.
Yeah, and she screamed, and then he covers her mouth again, and he's like, like, shut up, people are going to be able to hear you. Meanwhile, in her brain, we're again having a graphic description of her being thrown right back into her rape, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's rough. And then he's like, stop, people are going to hear you, blah, 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 and she, like, it turns into this thing. He, like, lets her go, right? And he says, that's it. He rolled off her, shaking his hand. I've tried to be liberated and understanding, but I'm not doing this anymore. She was so startled, she quit struggling. He shot to his feet.
This is after he let go of her enough for her to get off the bed, run all the way to the door, and try to leave buck naked.
Mm-hmm.
And him grabbing her by the waist and dragging her back to the bed, being like, you're even crazier than I thought you were, and throwing her down again.
Yeah.
So she's like almost escaped one time.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry, go ahead. So now
And
he's
then-
like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah,
Which,
and
like,
he says-
that should have been your response from the start, Dan.
Yeah, if you don't want to do this, guess what, buddy? Consent goes both ways. And like, this is not
You don't
me.
have to do
this
any
is
of
not me
this.
shaming him for this. Like, it was, frankly, it is. I loved that he was willing to participate in kinky things that aren't really his bag, right?
Yeah.
But he was doing it for somebody he cares about, right? Because he wants them
Yes.
to enjoy. Like, that's wonderful. The kink shaming can fucking take a seat, but like, that's wonderful. The internal monologue, though, of like, there's a difference between doing something because somebody likes it and it doesn't really, like, you don't really feel one way or the other about it, right? Like, God knows there are kinks that I'm not into, but like, if a partner I'm with is like really into it, yeah, let's fucking, like, I don't mind
Sure,
doing
man.
it. It's not something that's gonna like really get me going in the sense that
The
like
thing is not going to get me off, but
But
how
the
much
fact
you're
that
into
you're-
it is going to get me off.
Exactly. And like, that's wonderful.
But the thing that crosses the line for me is him being like, I don't want to do this thing. I will do it for her, but I'm so annoyed with her that I'm going to go whole hog in order to punish her for liking this thing that I don't like.
Oh my God. And that's another thing is like, if you are in that space, this is not a safe space to be practicing kink. You do
No.
not hit somebody or like get rough with somebody in a kink scene because you
When you're
legitimately
actually mad.
have angry feelings. That is unsafe sex 101.
To the max.
Like, that's when it goes from kink to abuse. This is when kink becomes not kink. This kink becomes abuse masquerading as kink, right?
Yes.
Like, and so he basically is like, I'm stopping. I don't care that you told me not to stop. I'm stopping. I'm sick and tired of feeling like some slug who can only get laid if he beats up women. If you ask me, you've got enough notches on your bedpost to have a little more sensitivity when it comes to men. Don't worry, listener. We're going to sneak in some slut shaming.
Yeah.
From now on, when a woman tells me to stop, I'm stopping, even if she's already told me not to pay any attention when she tells me to stop. Bewildered. And actually, this was another point where I was like, oh, because I'm endlessly optimistic, people.
I know.
I was like, this is the turning point. Because then it was super cute. He's
know.
like, maybe I'd like to get strong armed for a
Yeah.
change. Maybe I'd like to be so irresistibly sexy that I got tied to the bed for once. Would that be too much to ask? And I was like, you know
Yeah.
what? You're fucking right, Dan. You're
Yeah.
right. You deserve to be so irresistibly sexy that like they can't hold themselves back, right? Like,
Sure.
and I was like, this is the turning point. And then I continued to believe this is the turning point because, listener, this turns into one of the most
was.
beautiful consensual sex scenes I've ever read in my life. Because she basically explains to him, she's like, I have a kissing allergy, kind of. And so, like, when I told you not to stop, I only meant while we were kissing because sometimes it scares me, right? But like, I do want to do it.
I
It's
want
just
to be
like,
able to power through.
exactly. But when I say stop in any other time, I actually mean stop. And then it's soft.
Feels terrible.
Yeah. But then like they kiss again, and then it's like, it's soft and he's exploring her and she's never felt so, because like, to be clear, listener, all of the sex that she has ever had in her entire life was either a sexual assault or a attempting to take control post-sexual assault situation.
Where she's an object.
Yes. And like and they're kissing and she's comfortable and it feels good. And then in the middle of something, like near the beginning, she tells him to stop and he does. And she's relieved.
She's like, okay.
And she's like, okay. And then they go, there's a super cute scene where he goes into the bathroom and comes back with like a fuckload of condoms. And she's like,
she says, can we just pretend that I'm a virgin maybe?
mm-hmm.
Like, can we have that kind of sex? That's the sex she's requesting, is like soft and slow and check in a lot. And like, is this still okay? That kind of sex.
Yeah. And then he gets those condoms and she's like, oh boy, you think awful highly of like where tonight's going to go. Like, aren't you being a little like, what's optimistic about the evening? And he's like, how does a lady maiden like you even know what these are? Because he's getting into the virgin thing, right?
It's adorable.
Like, and she's like, television. And then they laugh and she's realizing for the first time that you can laugh in bed and have a good time. And like, then they have this like, this is also super cute because and I'm sorry that we're just going to sit in this scene for a minute and glory because the rest of the book is terrible. Because she's wearing this outfit, right? And she asks him, will you get naked, basically? And he does. And then he says, this peep show works two ways, you know? And because he nods towards the part of her still hidden beneath the spread that had settled in her lap. I'm too shy, she replied, sinking back on her heels. And he says, I guess I can understand that, considering your inexperience and everything. The mattress sagged as he settled down on the edge. What I'm going to suggest is this. Since you're a maiden lady, you might be less embarrassed if you just reached under the cover, slipped off what you've got, and handed it out. And like, he's being so thoughtful, and I was swooning. And then she says, stop again. And he does. And then they continue and he's like, all right, Miss Virgin Lady, I'm going to get you ready. And he does. He's touching on her and worshiping her and being so sweet. And then she tells him to stop again. And he does. And then they continue. And then at one point he says to her, and this was so fucking important. At one point he says to her, I don't have the exact quote, but he says, we're getting to the point where I'm not going to be able to stop if you tell me to stop. Just so you know. Yeah. And she's like, okay, that's fine. And then it's about time for them to do the final deed. And she gets nervous. And he's already said this. And he's about to stick it in. He's about to penetrate her. And she's like, stop. And then he does. And he rolls over and he like makes some comment about like, oh my God, you're killing me. And I wasn't mad about it because like, no, that's fine. But you stopped. And then, and she, the power, the empowerment she feels with that happen, she is like.
I'm pretty sure he does penetrate her.
Well, hang on. We're not even there yet. Because she feels so empowered. And she like is like, okay, I'm into this again. And then she pulls him onto her and they're kissing. Yes. And she in her head thinks to herself about how in an ephemeral way, because he is stopping in this moment, she loves him. And it's gratitude and it's beautiful. And then he's about to penetrate her and she says, please don't hurt me. And he says, I won't ever hurt you for anything. And then enters her so slowly and carefully. And like, he's holding on to her and he's like, make as much noise as you want. And it's so good. And they're both so into it. And then they are literally mid coitus. And she is like, oh my God, stop. Because she gets nervous. And he does. He pulls out and rolls over. And he's like, I'm dying. And she feels so empowered and she climbs on top of him and rides him and she feels the shackles of her past leave her and she feels free to actually enjoy this and goes for it. And she's riding him and he's touching her clit and then they both come like freight trains and it's beautiful. And all I could think was this entire book has brought us to this. And you know what? It was worth it. This scene made everything up until now not great. I was still pissed. about things. But like, I was like, I don't regret.
But it seemed like there was a reason for it.
Yes, I did not regret reading the rest, like the earlier parts of this book and powering through it for this. And then Susan Elizabeth Phillips looked me dead in my beautiful eyes and hupped my face gently.
So gently.
And said, I hate you, and I'm going to prove it.
Yeah.
Because now we have the rest of the book, and we're going to fucking motor through it, because guess what? This was the only good part of this book, was this consensual sex scene.
Yeah, unfortunately. Like, and
I wish
like,
this
I
scene,
wasn't even...
I wish I could pull this out of this book and put it in something else so I could actually appreciate it and love it, you know?
Well, because that's the thing. I was still in such a trauma response in my body that I actually wasn't able to appreciate the scene until we just talked about it. This is when it became beautiful for me. Up until that point, every time he stopped, I was just like, you don't get a fucking medal. Great job. Like, you did the decent thing just now. I'm so glad that she's feeling empowered. But like, I like, it's beautiful, and it is.
Well,
and the way that you explained it is so perfect.
The reason I loved
reading,
it so much in the book is all the way through all of this, I was so optimistic. I was hoping, because like that happens in every book. And the books I hate the most are the ones where I'm optimistic all the way through to the end, or through to a certain point that is a decent way through the book, and I think that we hit it.
Yeah.
Because this author this book could have been beautiful if it had shifted post this, right? If this had actually been a turning point. This is when Susan Elizabeth Phillips broke my heart after this scene. And this is when I started hate reading. The only reason I was going to finish this book was as a hate read, so that I could come on pod and...
Yeah, yell about it.
Yeah, yell about it.
Because here's the thing. We've talked in the past about one-click authors or whatever, or like authors that you trust with anything. Sierra Simone is one of those. Rebecca Weatherspoon is one of those. There are authors out there. Tiffany Reese is one of those. There are authors out there that I can look at a blurb and be like, this has every single one of my triggers, but I'm going to go into it and I'm going to read it because I know that this author will take care of me. This author takes care in their writing. This author is not reckless. That doesn't mean that they're not graphic. That doesn't mean that they're not violent. That doesn't mean that there aren't scenes that live rent-free in my head. But I know that by the end of the book, I will feel good about everything. I will believe the HEA. There will be an appropriate grovel, and I will have been cared for. And I meant to say this earlier, but here I am saying it way too far into it. I think I just have to make a rule on the podcast. I'm so sorry if there are any more 5-star Susan Elizabeth Phillips recs. I'm going to break my promise to you, and I refuse to read another one.
Yeah, this is the end of it.
If you did recommend a Susan Elizabeth Phillips book, just email us with another one, and I promise to do your book still. But this book proved to me that as an author, Susan Elizabeth Phillips does not care about me. She is reckless with how she writes about certain situations. And as evidenced by this book, the follow-through isn't worth it. The resolution doesn't work for me. And
so I'm going to reassure you, Mel, I literally just looked it up. This is it. There's nothing else on here. So
don't recommend a Susan Elizabeth Phillips book. I fucking refuse. I'm sorry. That's me taking care of me.
Yeah, and we'll put this in notes as well, just so that, like, because, you know, there are possible Susan Elizabeth fans that...
And that's great.
Yeah, and that's great.
It's probably just not going to work for me. I just didn't know that she could hurt me like this.
Well, and that's the thing is, like, this is the point where the authors you were just talking about, the ones that we trust to take care of us, this would have been the turning point, right? This is where this would have been the upswing, right? The rest
but
of
they
this
also would have taken a lot more care with a lot of the earlier stuff.
A lot of the earlier
we would have
stuff
known
as well.
that guy was homophobic without saying the F word.
Yes. Oh, and there's a whole subplot with some crazy asshole who drops the N-word a lot, like unnecessary races. What? I literally don't understand why those were necessary, right? Like, race isn't brought up hardly in this book, except for the fucking racist shit towards Darnell, talking about how, like, well, you know, like, that's just what black men are like, aggressive and scary.
He's
and
just so dangerous.
and
I don't want my poodle around him.
And like, oh my God. And don't worry. This black man isn't scary. He's a sweetheart. 'Cause like, black people can be fucking fantastic too.
What?
Ma'am. Wow. Really? That's what we're... Oh, okay. Okay, Susan Elizabeth Phillips.
Yeah.
All right, Phoebe Somerville.
She literally goes up to Darnell because she's frightened that he's holding her dog.
Uh-huh. Yeah. You know what? Because what's going to happen is we keep saying we're going to motor. We've hit the point where there's nothing. This book is not redeemed ever after this. This was the final straw. No, poorly. This is the final straw, and so now we can motor. We're just gonna fucking cruise through this shit to the end.
Yeah, she gets super slut shamed because a very artistic photo shoot in which her naked body was painted to look exactly like the painting that was behind her. Photographs of those things came out in a very well-respected magazine, but football can't handle it. And also, somebody saw her coming out of his room late at night, and so rumors are swirling there. The only reporter who asks an offensive question happens to be the only overweight reporter. Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. She handles it gracefully and beautifully.
Yeah, she handles it wonderfully, actually, because he's like, well, how was Dan in the sack? And she looks at him and says, he was great. So are all of the people that I slept with.
And rumored to have slept
supposedly.
With. Yeah.
But you were lacking, and everyone laughs, and it's a whole thing.
Hilarious.
And like, ha, 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 ha. But like, I say she handled it great in the sense that like, she's not fazed by it, right? She's like, she has a response. She's like, get fucked, dude.
Yeah. She definitely rises to the occasion.
Yeah, and then
they keep on losing. Oh no, I'm so sorry. Because of this Beaumont photo shoot thing, he loses his ever-loving mind. He yells at her, and oh my God, there's that time that he slut shames her over her clothes, and he says, I suppose you know you disgraced yourself at the game today by showing up in that snake charmer outfit, blah, blah, blah. So then they go into the conference room after this Beaumont magazine thing. He looks at it and he's immediately like, you're a slut whore, and I can't believe you would do this, and la, 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 la. She's feeling terrible. Ron tries to defend her by being like, I don't care how you feel about the photos. You need to stop this right now. And Dan says, I'll stop when I decide to stop. Unless you want to bring an outhouse full of shit on your head, remember that I'm the one coaching this team. Looks to me like you've got more than you can handle just taking care of bimbo control. Mm-hmm. He gets suspended for a week, which is illegal according to his contract, and he throws a big fit, but then he does leave, and then he realizes that he's being the biggest asshole that's ever bullied anyone in his life.
Sorry, buddy. Too little, too late.
Yeah.
Then we have like a ton of scenes of them together and like interacting. And I'm not gonna lie, at this point in the book, every time I legitimately like was amused by something, I just hated it more.
You were mad about it.
I was bitter that there were parts that I enjoyed in the rest of that. Like, I was so fucking angry about it at this point, like in a spiteful way, right?
Yeah.
And then, oh my God, I just have to comment on this because, like,
please,
it boggled, like, so unnecessary, right? And, like, I get it. This book came out when it did, but also, like, this is just, again, reading it through the lens I have now, right? He makes a joke about turning her dog into Chinese food because, you know,
oh, yeah,
Chinese people eat dogs.
Yeah, he says something like it being a Chinese
hors d'oeuvre.
appetizer.
Yeah.
Hors
And I was
d'oeuvre.
like, why?
Go
Like,
fuck yourself.
what? Literally, the only thing that did was make me understand that he is
Racist.
Yeah. And I just.
I don't care how you treat the people of color you know in your life. You're fucking racist.
Well, don't worry. We don't know how he treats other people of color, but like he's cool to Darnell because Darnell is a fucking wealthy football player that he depends on to win games.
And he's useful. And he knows him personally. He's
Yeah.
not just a black person.
Yeah, and then
Sabrina.
he fucking this happens so many times, literally in my notes where I have commented, I would have DNF'd this book by now so fucking hard if it wasn't for the like at this point it was a hate read, and that's the only thing that got me through because
Yeah.
she even like bucks up to him and makes acknowledgments. Like at one point she tells her sister, today's going to be a living history lesson for you, Mal, on life in the 50s. You'll get to spend time with a man who's managed to miss an entire social movement. And then I think it was supposed to be entertaining that his response to this was, climb in, ladies. I'd open the doors for you, but I don't want to be accused of holding back anybody's liberation. And then she responds, if he takes us out to eat, Molly, order the most expensive thing on the menu. In the 50s, the men always paid. Dang, Dan grumbled. Now you're playing hardball. It's not a
even
joke,
fucking
though.
Charming.
It's not a joke because he legitimately is a fucking sexist piece of shit.
Yeah. In the blurb.
Yeah. and yeah, this is a great example of like, I was warned. I didn't read the synopsis, but like I would have been warned.
At least for that, there was no other warning whatsoever.
No, not for anything else. So then they have like some scenes where like he's there and is like doing things to help like her and Molly fix their relationship, like slowly but surely. And like we see these scenes, she starts thinking in her head about how important he is, how like much she cares about him and all of these things. And I'm like, I don't see that. I'm not witnessing the things that you seem to think make him a redeemable human being.
Phoebe was a crackerjack, all right. Without quite knowing how it happened, she had managed to earn his respect.
Yeah, and then like things start to flip around in media, right? The media, because she's dressing more conservatively, they start winning games, and the media starts making comments like, oh man, she was done dirty by her dad's will and blah, blah, blah. And
okay, so then at one point, they win a game because she goes in and gives them a pep talk that tries to loosen them up a little bit because
think naked boys.
Yeah, he has like turned them into these tense, like they can't catch a football, they can't tie their shoes, they're so tense.
Mm-hmm.
So she goes in and she gives him a pep talk and she's like, here's what I want you to do. I want you to think of them naked. Think naked. And it becomes like this adorable little catchphrase. The defensive linemen are smiling and like they play and they win. He takes her into the bathroom of the airplane. I'm sorry. He busts in to the bathroom of the airplane when she's trying to leave. And he basically tells her that she can never, ever even look at his football team again, let alone get in the locker room without his prior knowledge. And like, he doesn't know what's going on in her empty little head and all the bullshit. Somehow that then turns into her being like, I don't know who you think you are, but I'm the fucking owner of the team. He's hard now. And
they're on the plane.
And
We're joining the Mile High Club.
And it's not because, wait, he's hard. And it's not because she stood up for herself. It's because she wiggled while she did it.
And the plane was jiggling her around.
And they're in such a small space. So like he fingers her and then he won't let her do anything because in his mind, he has too much respect for her now.
Oh my God. And like throughout this entire book, and this is a thing that in other books I clock, but I don't fucking viscerally hate, is like every time they have any experience, he's like, wow, she really does act like she doesn't know what she's doing, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then like surprise, he finds out at the end that she doesn't know what she's doing because she's never done it before. And like, because she gives him a blowjob and he's like, man, I'm so into this, but I'm so confused because she's not doing it right. And I would think that an old pro like this would know what she's doing, blah, blah, blah.
You don't know her. You haven't asked her a single question about herself, you fucking monster.
Mhm.
So then he doesn't let her, and he realizes that she feels rejected because of course she does. And then he like tries to make it better, but not well enough. And then for the next 2 months, he does not
Hang on,
what?
Mel.
Yeah, tell us.
She asks him after this because he's like stopped it. He's made her come twice, and she's like touched on his dick, giving him a blow job. He hasn't come though, and he pulls back, and she's like, "How do you do it?" And he's like, "Do what?" And she's like, "Act so hot, and then turn so cold." She believed she'd been rejected, even though he'd tried not to. He knew he'd hurt her. Wow, dude, you are truly fucking
and then he takes no action
of understanding human emotion. Oh no, God, don't worry, he does take action, Mel. He does take action.
No.
Because he knows the only way to heal that hurt is to turn her back into a spitfire. And so he tells her,
God.
I was trying to be a good guy and you owe me for it. I was respecting you and you threw that respect back in my face. And you know what? One of these days, I'm going to take what is owed to me at a time of my choosing, anywhere, anytime. And when I say now, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You're going to come with me, and then your body will become my own personal playpen.
And she loves it.
And then she's like going back at it. And like, again, this fucking quote,
That would be
this
great.
scene out of context.
Wonderful. Okay, so now for the next 2 months, because on the rest of this plane ride, he has decided that she is the whore and Sharon is the Madonna. And so he can only spend time with Sharon romantically, but he doesn't want to give up Phoebe. And so he's going to continue like being friends with Phoebe. He just cannot have sex with her. And that is how he will justify to himself enjoying both women simultaneously.
Yep.
He's also already decided that he and Sharon are going to wait until marriage to have sex, even though he's had 0 conversations with her about it. He just assumes she'll be fine with it because, recall, she is the Madonna. And so now we go through this whole inner monologue thing in which at one point he's like, at the end of the summer, he was going to propose to Sharon. Meanwhile, I don't think that at this point he had told us he had even had dinner with her yet. He'd only asked her out. That's how much of an object women are. Regardless, he starts having dinners with her or whatever. She's skittish around him. He doesn't understand why. He doesn't know what to do about it. But he can't be mad about it because that's what he wanted. He wanted a good woman, one of those flower-dusted ones that aren't sexual and love kids but don't know how to make them. And so a big man like him would be scared. He can't be mad about it.
The only buns in the oven they know how to handle are a fucking biscuit. Like,
that's right. So meanwhile, it's 2 months and Phoebe has been like going crazy because she wants to have sex with him. She wants to have a relationship with him, not just this like coworker friendship they have, although she makes sure to tell us she treasures that too. So like she goes in at one point, he's working out. She makes sure to weigh herself, but not in his eyesight because, oh no, she doesn't want him to know how big and giant she is. And then she tries to kiss him. It's like a whole thing. He's like, Phoebe, no. They get interrupted by Reed, who's a douchebag. And then, like, they're winning all these games now, which is great because they have to go to the AFC Championship, and that's the only way that she'll keep the team. And then Reed plants in her head, like, I bet he's only getting with you. And, like, he's keeping just enough distance so that if you don't get the team, he can walk away from the relationship. But if you do get to the team, he can propose to you and get the team.
Then we have this whole scene where she is at dinner to essentially renegotiate the stadium contract because they have a shitty stadium contract and the team is losing money hand over fist, which you can't do when you're paying people $10 million every 4 years to do shit. And she's playing the ditzy, hitsy, bimbo blonde to do all of this.
In no clothes.
Yeah, in a dominatrix outfit. And then during this conversation, he suddenly realizes there's no way he can marry Sharon when Phoebe's right here and I can't help it.
Well, because he finally is impressed by her. He realizes that for definitely sure, she's really smart. She just plays the bimbo act in order to manipulate people and get what she wants because they are just as sexist as he is. But we find out in this conversation, and I know it was written in 1994, but I refuse to believe that this person wasn't known as a sexually assaulting blowhard at the very best.
Oh my
in
God.
1994.
Yeah.
We find out that she is close fucking personal friends with Trump.
When I tell you I record scratched at that, I was that was just the icing on
Even
a shit
Donald
cake.
Trump happened to me in this
I
book.
know. The hits just kept coming with this book, and they came out of left field sometimes. They really came out of left field. It would have been one thing if it had been like a single throwaway line. No, this is a solid like 2.5 pages about her buddy-buddy relationship with Trump and how he's helping her out with all of this. And I was like, especially where we are, right? Like with what's coming up, like what's happening right this very second in the world. I was like, this is
when I got heartburn.
I could have used a Trump trigger warning, frankly.
Yeah.
Of all of the things in this book. And I could have used a trigger warning for that too, you know?
This is wild. So then he takes her home and he still doesn't manage to make enough words to tell her that he cares about her more than just her body. But they do have sex.
Yeah, they have sex and there's like some entertaining witty repartee and stuff. And like but it's at this point, it's too fucking late. There's nothing you can do to redeem yourself at this point.
Well, not to mention that
you.
it's shat upon immediately by her covering herself up and being like, you're looking at me and I'm fat.
Mm-hmm.
And him not even. Because
oh my God.
in my brain, Susan Elizabeth Phillips would at least have the hero say, you're not fat. You're one of the good ones.
No, don't worry.
Not
What he
one of the fat ones.
Word for word, she says, she's skinny and I'm fat. And his response is, man, oh man. I'm giving up on women. I'm definitely giving up. And then like a paragraph later, he says, I know lots of women feel insecure about their bodies, and I know I should be sweet and understanding about this. But Phoebe, honey, having you worry about being too fat is pretty much like a billionaire worrying about his money being too green.
I just want to kill everything.
Nothing that you just said is actually reassuring, bud.
No.
Like, none of it is validating.
None of it has anything to do with her.
Yeah, and so then they have sex, and he, at the end of it, he's like, oh no, he willed those gentle feelings away, cursed himself, but as she once again convulsed around him, he would have died for her. His fierceness left him, blah, 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 blah. He squeezed his eyes shut against the surge of an emotion he refused to name. Honestly, I'm shocked you can put a name to any emotion.
You can identify emotions?
Mm-hmm. It's incredible. Truly a feat. Gold star,
Great
bud.
job.
And then they didn't have use protection. And so they have this whole conversation about like, I get tested every year because of my physical, but like, when did you last get tested? Because as a reminder, this is during the AIDS epidemic. And like, that's a legitimate concern, right?
Well, and first, she's upset that the thought of getting her pregnant is so repugnant to him.
Oh my God.
And then he says, I'm worried about more than just pregnancy.
Yeah.
And then she says, you have nothing to worry about. And she's being cagey about it.
Mm-hmm.
So understandably, but also shittily, he's like, what are you hiding? Tell me what you're hiding. You experienced slut whore. And then she has to be like, but I'm not at all. I am actually a Madonna in disguise. I have put my slut behind me.
Yeah, so she tells him everything, and without putting it explicitly into words.
Including this guy, Craig, raping her.
Yeah, she makes it very clear that, like, it was very important that, like, it means a lot that you're the one I chose to break my celibacy with. And then he is so sorry and comforts her and all of these things. She learns about how he grew up with his fucking belt whooping dad and his alcoholic mother. And she can't help but wonder if, like, this is why family must be so important to him and all of these things. And
But
now,
he doesn't say enough to reassure her, enough for her to tell him that she also wants kids. Why do you need reassurance about just talking about something you want independently in your life, Phoebe?
right?
You can just say stuff like that out loud.
Yeah. So now we have the third act breakup, right? But like what leads to this is she is at a game. Sharon's also there. He's already at this point decided he hasn't had a chance to, but he has decided to break up with Sharon and be with Phoebe for the rest of their lives. Because obviously
it seems like Phoebe might be enough of a whole woman, maybe.
She's going to be a good mother.
He can at least settle for her,
And so she finds out through Sharon, like they're talking, and it becomes very clear and apparent to her that Dan is the one Sharon's talking about, is about to propose, and Sharon fusses that they haven't even had sex yet, and blah, blah, blah.
And so Phoebe understandably is like, oh, I'm the girl he fucks and she's the girl he marries.
Yeah.
So she gets really mad and she avoids him for a long time until he finally shows up at her house, and she happens to be baking cookies with two children who live next door. And it's crazy to him because she doesn't look like anybody's mom ever could look. She's so hot and sexy, and her red nails are so funny in that
She
flower
doesn't
pot.
look like the woman he's always dreamed of with her red vampire nails and spandex pants, but wow, I love seeing her with children.
So then he's like, what's happening? And she's like, I'm fucking mad at you. And he's like, oh, so you have been avoiding me? And she's like, yeah, I mean, just take off your pants or whatever. You're here for sex, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, and he's like, what? No, how could you? And I don't, does he even find out about Sharon?
Yeah, so she admits that she met Sharon at the Bills game, and he immediately understands what's going on. But he's like, Sharon doesn't have anything to do with the two of us. If you're thinking I was sleeping with both of you at the same time, you're wrong. And she says, that's what I understand. You had the best of both worlds, didn't you? You could get your rocks off with the bimbo while you kept your future wife pristine. And he says, is that the kind of man you think I am?
Sir, that's the kind of man you are.
She says it's hard to think anything else. You're not wrong.
That's the kind of man you have told me in your brain that you are.
Yeah, and now she's thinking to herself, like, all I need you to do is tell me that you love me. That is all I need, and then I will believe you, and not, like, don't tell me that you want to marry me, because at this point he said, like, I wanted to marry you, and she's like, so what? Am I, like, number one in your future wife mother situation because I'm not going to hit our kids? And so this entire time she's thinking to herself, tell me that you love me, that it's not just because of children, that it's not just because I might be a good mother and I'm not going to hit our kids. Like,
or that you also want to fuck me. Yeah,
like tell me it's because you love me and not for all of these other awful reasons. And he's not, over and over and over. And then she says, do you suddenly want to marry me because you saw me with the twins, or is it because I'm only one game away from owning the stars? And he's like, what happens at that game has nothing to do with us. And she's like, but it does, because if we win, I will always wonder if that was the only reason that you proposed and want to marry me. And he's all pissed, and he's like, I won't throw the game for you. I won't throw it for anything. I've been offered hookers, blow, and money, and I've never said yes to any of it. And she's fucking distraught because even now she's thinking to herself, don't say that. Just say, I want to do it because I love you.
Yeah.
I want you
simple.
for you. And he's not. And then he storms out. And then it's game time. And
Look, man, then there's a last chapter kidnapping. Okay, it doesn't matter. She's put in danger.
Yeah.
And the only way that she's going to get out of danger is if he loses the game. So he starts losing the game for them.
He gets the team in on it.
Yeah, she wallops the guy who had her, and she runs out to the field, and they manage to win anyway.
Bing, boom, bong, football times. There's a lot of football in these last two chapters. And then the crazy dude shows up in the stands with a gun, and he goes back to his quarterback roots and hits that gun out of his hand with a football throw, and blah, blah, blah. Then the final chapter, Bobby Tom, Darnell, and all of like 2 other guys, and he go up to rough up Reed because we found out at the end of this book that, you remember how Craig was the one who raped her in high school? No, it was Reed. Her cousin.
Reed pushes her up against a wall and says, "It wasn't Craig in the dark. It was me. So just know that if you win and you get this football team, I've been inside you."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so they know about it. So the boys go rough him up, and he's never going to be a problem again. We find out that his plan, we find out his like retirement plan. There's some kinky horny times, which in another book would have been great, where he blindfolds her and they're having sex, and then suddenly she realizes they're on the 50-yard line of the stadium.
I wondered about this. Yeah, I wondered about this because at some point in there, he blindfolds her and he's talking her through it, and he's saying like, "I'm fucking you in front of like a bar full of bikers," essentially is the scenario he comes up with. But then at the end, when he takes off the blindfold, he says, "I wanted to replace those memories with something else." Is that because she got raped in the dark? I don't know what memories he's trying to replace and why specifically it includes a blindfold and public sex.
I'm going to be really honest, Mel. The last like 4 chapter of this book, I just...
Whimsy, fucking
I didn't even whimsy. Whimsy is an active choice. Herbs is an active choice. The rest of this book just happened to me.
Checked out. Yeah.
And then epilogue, he has everything he's ever wanted: a beautiful wife, a wonderful family, 2 kids, and a house in the country. Whoop-de-doo, good for you. And the book is over, and I guess they live happily ever after, in theory.
And this is the book that launched like a 10-book series that people love.
And you know what? Good for them. I'm happy for them that they have the series, and that they love it. And again, this is a great example of, I hate this book with pretty much every fiber of my being. But if somebody tried to tell you you're not allowed to like this book, I'll fight to the death to defend your right to love this book.
Yeah. Like, so I never want to do this again. I don't want to ever again.
I think what I wish I had done is chapter 12 is when the beautiful sex scene happens. And when I realized that it was all downhill from here, and not just downhill, it was like the steepest roller coaster drop into hell. Right?
Yeah.
I wish that when I realized it wasn't better from here, right? From that point, I wish I had messaged you and said, "Mel, I understand that this is a 5-star wreck. We're not going farther than this." Like, yeah, because listener,
it really did seem like it was going to get better, though.
But it became very clear within like three or four chapters after the sex that sex scene that it wasn't getting better. Yeah, so I don't know. It's very conflicting, right? Because so as a fan for forever, there were times that you and Aaron read books, hated them, and read the whole thing. Like, I can think of a couple off the top of my head, right? And the fact that I can think of those books, I could probably name them, right? Or go find them in the back catalog that y'all hated, but finished and talked about them anyway, or finished for the most part. And part of it is the spoken contract that Heaving Bosoms has with fans.
Yeah.
That if there's a 5-star recommendation, you read the book, whatever it is, and it's been stated multiple times. You can recommend a book that you fucking love, but you can also recommend whatever fucking romance you want. You could recommend a book that you fucking hate.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You could recommend that. Yeah, and
they just want to hear us talk about a book they don't like. Great.
And there's this, like, I've hated books before, but this is like not irrationally hated, but like I could see the redeeming quality. You know, and I like this I don't know.
Woo! Hey, we did it. It's done now. Good
You know,
job, Sabrina and Mel.
You know, Mel, I've been really spoiled on the podcast since I've joined.
It's true. It's true. You know what? Here's the thing. There have been other books that I have disliked as much as this one, but they at least had like random bear attacks and other shit I could laugh about. And like, there just wasn't.
Well, and like stuff you could laugh about and enjoy without hating the fact that you enjoyed it.
Yes.
And laugh
Yeah,
about
it wasn't meant to be like romantically charming.
Because there's a bunch of little scenes. I'll be honest with you. Most of my highlights aren't things that I hated in the book because I knew that there was no way I was going to forget why I hated it.
Yeah.
So like my highlights are stuff that I enjoyed, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's stuff that I enjoy. Like there's this fucking part there's a part in their like big sex scene after he realizes he's in love with her and he's not going to get with Sharon, right? Where he says to her, and I was delighted by this, she starts to strip and he's like, not so fast. Could we sort of pretend, now don't take this the wrong way because I don't mean anything disrespectful by it, but could we pretend that I'm planning to leave $100 bill on the dresser and expecting to get my money's worth out of this striptease? And she's like, what's underneath this dress is definitely worth more than $100. And he says, as long as you take American Express, you can name your price. And like, it was cute. And then like just a little bit later, she's like pulling, she's like getting into it and she like pulls the dress off slowly. But before she like shows him the goods, she's like, what's the credit limit on your American Express card? And he says, you stop worrying about credit limits and start worrying about whether or not you're still going to be able to walk when I'm done with you. And like, I thought that was cute, right? And I was angry that I enjoyed it. And
well,
like,
and meanwhile, I thought it was cute, but I couldn't even enjoy it, not just because of the rest of the stuff, but because it all started on the premise that sex work is shameful and that he would be disrespecting her by implying that she was doing sex work.
I did whimsy that.
God damn it.
I whimsied that. No, like I was aware of it. I actively.
No, I know. But you were just like, I can't.
I can't. Or like, there's like, but that's the thing is, it's like, it's little snippets that I enjoyed. And then I was so fucking angry because like that, like there's so many things in this book that make it clear this book could have been something different. And Susan Elizabeth Phillips has the skills and the awareness and the everything to make this a good book.
Yeah. And
that is not actively harmful to the reader.
Everybody made active choices to do harm.
Yeah.
To do otherwise. Like, I just don't understand.
Because, like, even the things that I love, like, so for example, and that's a great example, even the stuff that, like, I did enjoy, there is shit in it that is awful. Like, literally what you just said.
Listen, here's the thing. Between the thinness and the kink shaming and all this stuff, even the stuff that we tried to enjoy was full of microaggressions.
That's what it is. That's what it is. Yeah, that's exactly what it is, right? Because like the fucking dog comment earlier, that happens during a very cute scene, and so like there's some cute shit happening, and like it's delightful, and then it ends on that comment about turning poo into a Chinese hors d'oeuvre, and I was like, oh, okay, well, JK,
well, great,
bye,
great, here we are now.
Like, I
don't know. Okay. Sabrina, what is your lady love?
I had it before I literally talked about having it before we started the book. I'd come up with something, even after the shit show that was yesterday. By the way, PSA, I'm not going into detail, but advocate for yourself medically because doctors can really, really suck sometimes. Oh, that's what my fucking lady love was, because I literally cannot stop fucking thinking about what happened yesterday. So, like, the very long story short is that I had a really bad experience with a doctor yesterday, right? As a woman presenting person that, or like, you know, going to a doctor and weight becoming an issue and just the sheer dismissal of things, that being actively accused of lying about things,
Oh, yeah.
being actively accused of having something in my water bottle that is calorie ridden instead
right.
of water, as if I brought a fucking liter of tequila or something to my fucking, like, what do you think is in there? Simple syrup? Like,
Yeah, he said shit like, well, you're probably eating unhealthy things. And you said, like, what? And he was like, chips. And you said, I don't have that in my house. And he said, that's a lie. Everyone has that in their house. I don't have chips in my house right now. What the fuck?
Or like, or like all the times that you had fast food, or like all the times you eat fast food every week. And I was like, I don't.
Like once a month, maybe?
Yeah, it's like every other week, maybe, and it's once a week. I'm sorry, bud. That is, and then saying like it's unhealthy how little I eat, and basically being told simultaneously that I'm lying about how much I eat, or just not remembering eating. And at the same time being told that I'm eating, despite that, too much, and that what
the
I'm
only way
eating
you can gain weight, Sabrina,
is causing me to gain weight. There's so much more that happened. So this is a Lady Loves, shockingly, listener. This is part of the reason I was feeling extra spicy coming into recording about this book. My Lady Love is having a group of people who are so fucking empowering. And when I come with that situation, being reminded that I can advocate for myself, and not only can I do it, I have successfully done it in the past.
Yes.
So it's not just you can do this. It's a reminder that I can, right? This is not, and yeah, exactly. Like, my Lady Love is having a group of friends who are so fucking empowering when the world is just, because yesterday was a shit show even beyond that interaction. Yesterday was just a bad day. And having that group of people, I cannot possibly express to you how much I fucking love those people for just the support and the empowerment. And
it was immediate.
Yeah, it was immediate.
It was an immediate
These people
response.
were at work, they were doing things, they were maybe dealing with kids or family or whatever. They have a lot of stuff going on in their lives as well. And they immediately popped in to be like, you're a fucking badass, so keep being a badass.
Yeah.
And you've been a badass before. And this is not, like, I know that this super sucks right now, but you are fully capable of turning this around. Like, we love you and we support you and we're here for you and you could do this. And it was just, it's what I needed. It's what I needed.
Yeah.
And then I did, in fact, go spend the rest of the evening hate reading and mindlessly murdering people on Assassin's Creed, which is exactly what I needed. And guess what? They were like, we support you. We love you. Go murder. And I was like, thank you. Appreciate that.
Murder to death.
So yeah, long story short, Lady Love is having a group of empowering people who remind you of how incredible you are when you're feeling like poop.
Absolutely. My Lady Love is refusing to read Susan Elizabeth Phillips again.
Fuck,
and that's
yes.
that's not just SEP, but like, if there's an author that you don't like connect with and has hurt you, don't read them anymore. Just don't. I don't care if somebody says, like, this was the best book ever and it has so many tropes you love. You can say to yourself, I don't trust that author with those tropes or me. I don't trust them. They've broken many promises that are implicit and explicit between a reader and an author. And I don't want to do that anymore, and so I'm not going to. And I fully support everybody who does love this author. I'm so glad you loved that book, but I will not be imbibing that book. I will not. I just won't. Thank you so much for the offer. I'm going to find another book that has the same tropes, because Romancelandia is vast and beautiful and wonderful, and there's something here for everyone. And sometimes things are not for you. All right. Keeping a badass.
And love yourself as much as you love Setting a boundary.
Keep being a badass and love yourself as much as you love knowing who should and who should not have an opinion on whether or not sports teams should be named after Native Americans.
Mm-hmm. Oh, love yourself as much as you love Ron and Sharon getting a fucking book by an author you trust to do right by it.
Yeah. Okay, bye.
Bye. Not gonna lie, Mel, that was super cathartic.
Heaving Bosoms is produced by us, Melody Carlisle and Sabrina Bradley. Editing is done by Melody Carlisle.
Our theme music is by the incredible singer-songwriter Brittany Fonts, and our art is by ultra-talented author Kate Pryor. If you like our show, remember to follow us on your favorite podcast app, rate us 5 stars, leave a nice review, and of course, tell all your friends about us, even if they don't read romance.
If you want to get in touch, you can email us at heavingbosoms.podcast@gmail.com. If you want more of us, visit patreon.com/heavingbosomspodcast. You can also find us on Instagram at Heaving Bosoms, on TikTok at Heaving_Bosoms, and in our Facebook group, the Heaving Bosoms Geriatric Friendship Cult.
Head over to our website to sign up for our newsletter, get our Reading Embrace printable, and check out my audiobooks at heavingbosoms.com. All right, we'll be back next week with more swoons and snark. See you then.